My parents told every employer in town that I was a thief. For 3 years, I could not get hired anywhere. My dad Desmond looked me in the eye and said, "Maybe now you will learn to respect us." Last week, I finally got a job interview. The CEO walked in, looked at me and said, "Before we start, I need to give you this. Your grandmother left it with strict instructions." He handed me a sealed envelope dated 10 years ago. Before I tell you what was inside, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep of your family or had to fight for your own survival. My name is Naya and I am 29 years old. Sitting in the waiting room of Miller Logistics, I felt sweat trickling down my back. This was not a top-tier tech firm. It was a small warehouse distribution center on the edge of Atlanta. But after 3 years of rejection letters, it felt like my only lifeline. I smoothed the wrinkles on my only blazer. It was frayed at the cuffs, but I had spent an hour shaving off the lint to make it look presentable. My stomach twisted in knots. I needed this job. My savings were gone. My car was running on fumes. And the rent for my tiny studio apartment was 2 weeks overdue. Mr. Henderson, the hiring manager, tapped his pen on my resume. He was an older white man with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his tie. He looked at my transcript. "You graduated top of your class in data security," he said. "Why are you applying for an entry-level inventory tracking job?" I had rehearsed this answer 1,000 times. I said, "I am looking for a fresh start, sir. I want to build from the ground up. I just need an opportunity to prove my work ethic." He nodded slowly. It seemed like he bought it. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. I allowed myself to breathe. Maybe this was it. Maybe the curse was finally broken. Then the phone on his desk buzzed. He frowned and picked it up. "Hello. Yes, this is Henderson. Who is this?" My heart stopped. I knew that voice on the other end. It was faint but distinct. It was deep and gravelly. It was my father, Desmond. I watched Mr. Henderson's face transform. His polite curiosity vanished. His eyes narrowed into slits of suspicion. He looked at me like I was a cockroach that had crawled onto his clean desk. "Is that so?" he said into the receiver. "Thank you for warning me. I appreciate community vigilance." He slammed the phone down. The sound echoed in the small room like a gunshot. I tried to speak. "Mr. Henderson, I can explain." He raised a hand, silencing me. He did not just ask me to leave. He picked up my resume, my transcript, my 3 years of hard work, and ripped them in half right in front of my face. "Your father just called," he said. His voice was ice cold. "He told me about the incident at the laundromat. He told me you possess sticky fingers and a history of embezzlement." I felt the blood drain from my face. That was a lie. A vicious, calculated lie. I never stole a dime. My parents owned that laundromat and they cooked the books, not me. But Henderson did not care. "We do not hire thieves," he spat. "We handle expensive inventory here. Get out of my office before I call 911. I scrambled to pick up my purse. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped my keys. As I rushed out the door, I heard him mutter to his secretary, "Make sure she did not take anything on her way out." I walked out into the humid Atlanta heat. My chest felt like it was caving in. This was the 5th time. 5 interviews. 5 mysterious phone calls. My father was not just punishing me. He was hunting me. He wanted me broken. He wanted me crawling back to his pawn shop, begging for the $5 an hour job he kept dangling in front of me like a carrot on a stick. He wanted me to be his servant forever. I got into my car and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. I looked at my phone. There was a text message from my mother, Patricia. It read simply, "Come home, Nia. Stop embarrassing yourself. We have plenty of work for you at the store." The audacity of it made me want to scream. They cut my wings and then mocked me for not being able to fly. I started the engine. It sputtered and coughed before finally turning over. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw a black sedan parked across the street. The window rolled down slowly. It was my brother Marcus. He was watching me. He held up his phone and snapped a picture of my defeat, then sped away. They were tracking me. My own family was stalking me to ensure my failure. I felt a cold rage settling in my stomach, replacing the fear. They thought this was the end. They thought they had won. But they did not know about the email I had sent late last night to a company they thought was out of my league. They did not know that while they were playing checkers, I was about to start playing chess. I wiped my face and drove toward the highway. I was not going back to the pawn shop. Not today. Not ever. The house that I grew up in sat on a hill overlooking the neighborhood like a fortress. As I parked my beat-up sedan next to my father's pristine truck, I felt a familiar weight settle in my chest. This was not a home. It was a prison where the wardens were my own flesh and blood. I turned off the ignition and sat in the silence for a moment. My hands were still trembling from the humiliation at the interview, but I forced them to be still. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red but dry. Good. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I unlocked the front door and was immediately hit by the smell of rosemary and roasted garlic. My stomach growled violently, reminding me that I had not eaten since yesterday morning. In the dining room, the crystal chandelier cast a warm golden glow over the table. My parents, my brother Marcus, and his wife Emily were already seated. They were passing around platters of roast beef and mashed potatoes, steam rising from the hot food. Laughter floated through the air, but it died instantly the moment I stepped into the archway. 4 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. The silence was thick and heavy. My mother Patricia was the first to look away, focusing intently on buttering her roll. Marcus smirked, leaning back in his chair with a beer in his hand. But it was Emily who spoke first. She wiped her mouth delicately with a linen napkin and tilted her head to the side. Her voice was soft and sickeningly sweet, like poison wrapped in candy. "You are back early, Nia," she said. "I assume that means the interview did not go well." I walked further into the room, my heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floor. I did not answer her. I reached for the back of an empty chair, intending to sit down. My legs felt like lead. "Do not sit there, my father," Desmond said. His voice was low and dangerous. "That chair is for guests. You are not a guest. You are a burden." I froze. I looked at him, hoping to see a flicker of fatherly affection, but his eyes were hard as flint. I let go of the chair. "I am hungry, Dad," I said quietly. "Can I just have a plate?" Emily let out a small sigh. She looked at Marcus and then back at me. "You know, Nia, maybe this is a sign. We were just talking about you. Honestly, it is painful to watch you try so hard to be something you are not." "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked. "I mean, look at us." Emily gestured around the table. "Marcus is a visionary. Your father is a businessman. But you have always been different." I was reading this article the other day about genetics. It said that some lineages are just better suited for physical labor. It is nothing to be ashamed of. Your ancestors were built for strength, not for spreadsheets. Maybe you should stop fighting nature and just take the cleaning job. It is honest work. My blood boiled. It was a subtle racist jab wrapped in concern, the kind Emily specialized in. She was a white woman telling a black woman that her genetics limited her to manual labor, all while living in my parents' house and eating their food. I looked at Marcus, expecting him to defend me. He just laughed. "She has a point, Nia," he said. "You are strong like an ox. Why waste that staring at a computer screen? Plus, we need the floors done in the basement." I ignored them and reached for the platter of roast beef. I just wanted to eat. I would deal with their insults later. But before my fingers could touch the serving fork, my father slammed his hand down on the table. The silverware rattled. I said no, he barked. I pulled my hand back as if I had been burned. "Dad, please. I am starving." "This food cost money," Desmond said. He pointed a calloused finger at the roast beef. This meat is for people who contribute to this household, people who bring in paychecks, people who have respect. You have none of those things. He stood up and walked over to the refrigerator. He pulled out a Tupperware container and tossed it onto the counter. It landed with a dull thud. There is meatloaf from Tuesday in there, he said. If you are hungry, eat that. Tuesday. It was Friday. That meatloaf was 3 days old and dry as a brick. I looked from the steaming roast beef to the cold container on the counter. The message was clear. I was not worth a fresh meal. I was an afterthought. A scavenger. Mom, I said, turning to her. Are you going to let him do this? My mother finally looked up. Her eyes were empty, devoid of any maternal warmth. She took a sip of her wine. Your father is right, Nia, she said. We have coddled you long enough. If you want to eat like a queen, you need to earn it. Right now you are just a drain on our resources. Eat the leftovers or go to bed hungry. I felt something snap inside me. It was not sadness. It was the final tether of emotional attachment I had to these people. I walked over to the counter and opened the container. The smell of stale meat wafted up. I did not heat it up. I did not put it on a plate. I took a fork from the drawer and leaned against the counter, eating the cold, dry meatloaf while they feasted 10 feet away. I chewed slowly, forcing the food down past the lump in my throat. I watched them. I watched Emily whisper something to Marcus that made him guffaw. I watched my father slice the roast beef with surgical precision. I watched my mother preen under their attention. They looked like a picture-perfect family, but they were rot. They were decay. I finished the meatloaf and washed the fork in the sink. The water was cold against my hands. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands on a rag. Thank you for dinner, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. I started to walk toward the hallway that led to my room. Where are you going? Emily called out. We are not done talking. We need to discuss your schedule for next week. The pawn shop needs the floors waxed. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. I have some paperwork to do, I said. Paperwork? Marcus scoffed. What paperwork? Unemployment forms. I did not answer. I walked into my room and closed the door, locking it behind me. The room was small, barely big enough for a twin bed and a desk. It used to be a storage closet before they moved me back in. I sat down on the edge of the bed and pulled the crumpled envelope from my blazer pocket. I smoothed it out on my lap. They thought I was beaten. They thought I was broken. They thought I was upstairs crying over cold meatloaf. But as I looked at the seal on the envelope, the one Mr. Sterling had given me, I smiled. It was a cold, dangerous smile. They had no idea that while they were starving me, I was holding the keys to the kingdom. I was not just going to survive. I was going to own them. But first, I had to deal with the woman who gave birth to me. Because while my father was the hammer, my mother was the dagger, and I knew she had one more twist left in her. I could hear her footsteps approaching my door. She was coming to finish what the dinner had started. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. I barely had time to slide Grandma Hattie's envelope under my pillow before the lock clicked. My mother did not knock. In her mind, privacy was a privilege I had not paid for. Patricia swept into the room, bringing with her the scent of expensive perfume and the suffocating air of judgment. She did not look at me. She walked straight to my closet and began rifling through my limited wardrobe. You need to get rid of these, she said, pulling out a few blouses I had bought from a thrift store. They look cheap. If you are going to work at the front counter of the pawn shop, you need to look respectable. We cannot have customers thinking we are struggling. I stood up, my hands balling into fists at my sides. The humiliation from the dinner table was still burning in my throat, but I needed clarity. I needed to hear her say it. Mom, stop, I said. My voice was shaking, but I forced it to be loud. Stop touching my things. She paused, holding a gray cardigan in her hand. She turned slowly, her eyebrows raised in mock surprise. Excuse me, are you raising your voice at me in my own house? Did you do it? I asked. Did you tell the man at the logistics company that I stole from the laundromat? Did you tell him I was a thief? I expected her to deny it. I expected her to gaslight me to say I was crazy or paranoid. That was her usual tactic. But she did not. She simply dropped the cardigan on the floor and smoothed her silk blouse. I did what was necessary, Nia. Necessary, I choked out. You ruined my life. I had a chance at a real career. I had a chance to use my degree. Why would you destroy that? Because you are delusional, she said. Her voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. You think you can just walk out into the corporate world and succeed. You are not built for that. You are too soft, too emotional. Just like now. Look at you shaking over a simple job rejection. I did you a favor. I saved you from being fired later when you inevitably failed. She walked over to my desk and picked up a framed photo of me at my college graduation. She looked at it with disdain before placing it face down. Besides, she continued, you have responsibilities here. You cannot just leave. We have invested too much in you. Invested. I repeated the word, feeling a cold dread settle in my stomach. What are you talking about? Come to the living room, she said, turning her back on me. We need to go over the accounts. I followed her. I should have run. I should have grabbed my keys and left right then. But a morbid curiosity kept me tethered. I needed to see how deep the rot went. In the living room, my father and Marcus were gone. It was just the two of us. Patricia sat down on the leather sofa and opened a thick black ledger that was resting on the coffee table. She put on her reading glasses and licked her finger to turn the page. Sit down, she commanded. I remained standing. Suit yourself, she said without looking up. She ran her finger down a column of numbers. I have been keeping track, Nia, since the day you turned 18. Every expense, every meal, every utility bill. She turned the ledger around so I could see it. The pages were filled with her neat, cramping handwriting. College tuition, she read aloud. $40,000. We co-signed those loans, remember? Room and board during your summers off. 5,000. Dental work when you were 19. 2,000. Car insurance payments. 3,000. She looked up at me over the rim of her glasses. And then there is the interest, she added. We are business people, Nia. We do not lend money for free. Calculated at a modest 5% annual compound interest over the last decade. She tapped the bottom of the page with her manicured fingernail. Total investment, $120,000. I stared at the number. It was absurd. It was insanity. Mom, I said, my voice barely a whisper, you are charging me for raising me. You are charging me for being your daughter. I am charging you for being an adult who consumes resources, she corrected sharply. You think the world is free. You think you can just take and then walk away when you feel like it. No, that is theft. And I will not harbor a thief. She reached under the coffee table and pulled out a crisp typed document. It was already stapled. So here's the arrangement, she said, sliding the paper toward me along with a pen. Since you have no assets and no job, you cannot pay us back in cash. So you will pay us in labor. I looked down at the document. The header read, Employment and Debt Repayment Agreement. I scanned the lines. My heart hammered against my ribs. I, Nia Brooks, agree to work at Brooks Pawn and Loan for a period of 10 years, forfeiting all salary and wages, in exchange for room, board, and debt forgiveness. 10 years, I whispered. You want to own me for 10 years. It is a fair deal, Patricia said, leaning back and crossing her legs. You get a roof over your head, you get food, and you get to pay off your debt to the family who sacrificed everything for you. Marcus signed a similar agreement. You know, he knows the value of loyalty. Marcus just took $20 from my wallet, I snapped. Marcus is the manager, she shot back. He earns his keep. You do not. I backed away from the table. I am not signing that. That is slavery. It is illegal. Is it? She asked. Her eyes hardened. She stood up and took a step toward me, closing the distance. If you do not sign it, then you are confirming what I told that man on the phone today. You are a thief. You took our money for college. You took our food. You took our shelter. If you walk out that door without signing, I will file a police report for the theft of family funds. I have the receipts, Nia. I have the paper trail. With your background check already ruined by today, do you think anyone will believe you? I looked at her. Really looked at her. I searched for any trace of the mother who used to braid my hair on Sunday mornings. I searched for the woman who had bandaged my scraped knees. She was gone. Or maybe she had never existed. Standing in front of me was a loan shark in a silk blouse. She did not see a daughter. She saw a bad investment she was trying to recoup. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It was not fear anymore. It was clarity. Absolute crystalline clarity. Grandma Hattie had warned me. She had told me years ago that my parents loved money more than they loved God. I had not believed her then. I believed her now. I looked at the pen lying on the contract. I looked at the ledger. Then I looked at my mother. You really calculated the interest, I asked. Every penny, she said. I took a deep breath. The air in the house felt stale recycled. I need to think about it, I said. You have until tomorrow morning, she said, checking her watch. The store opens at 9. If you are not behind the counter with a signed contract, I am calling the sheriff. And you know Sheriff Miller has no patience for women who steal from their own families. She closed the ledger with a heavy thud. Go to your room, Nia, and do not touch the food in the kitchen. That is for employees only. I turned and walked away. I did not run. I did not cry. I walked with the steady rhythm of a soldier marching into battle. She thought she had trapped me. She thought she had cornered a frightened animal. She did not know that the animal was already holding the key to the cage. I went back to my room and locked the door. I pulled the envelope out from under my pillow. My hands were steady now. I broke the wax seal. It was time to see exactly what Grandma Hattie had left for me. It was time to see if 10 years of servitude was the only future I had, or if the old woman who cleaned floors for a living had prepared a different path. I tucked Grandma Hattie's letter deep inside my bra, right against my skin where no one could find it. My heart was pounding not from fear anymore, but from the adrenaline of possessing a nuclear weapon. I needed water. My throat was parched from the dry meatloaf and the bile of swallowing my mother's insults. I unlocked my bedroom door and stepped out into the narrow hallway that connected the bedrooms to the main living area. The hallway was dim. My parents had installed energy-saving bulbs that cast a sickly greenish hue on the peeling floral wallpaper. I took 2 steps toward the kitchen when a shadow detached itself from the wall and blocked my path. It was Marcus. My brother was 34 years old, but he stood in that hallway with the posture of a high school bully who had never quite grown up. He was wearing a designer polo shirt that was 2 sizes too tight, straining against a stomach built on beer and entitlement. He smelled of stale lager and expensive cologne, the scent of a man who spent money he did not earn. Going somewhere he asked, he did not move to let me pass. He leaned his shoulder against the doorframe, taking up as much space as possible. I need water, Marcus, move, I said, keeping my voice low. I did not want to wake the beast that was my mother again. Please, he mocked, tilting his head. You forgot the magic word. But then again, you seem to have forgotten a lot of things. Like how to be a good sister, or how to pay your debts. I tried to step around him, but he mirrored my movement, blocking me again. He looked down at the purse I had slung over my shoulder. It was an old leather bag I had bought at a garage sale years ago. Mom tells me you are refusing to sign the contract, he said. His eyes were not playful. They were predatory. You know that hurts her feelings, right? She is trying to help you, and here you are acting like you are too good to work for the family business. I am not too good for work, Marcus, I said, tightening my grip on my purse strap. I am too good to be a slave. There is a difference. He laughed, a short barking sound. Slave. You have a roof, don't you? You have electricity. You have Wi-Fi to send out those useless resumes. Who do you think pays for that? Dad pays. I pay. We all pay except you. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. I could feel the heat radiating off him. Speaking of paying, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, I am a little short this week. Emily wants to go to that new seafood place downtown, and my check from the shop does not clear until Monday. That is not my problem, I said, backing up until my heels hit the wall. Ask Dad. Dad is in a mood thanks to you, he said. So I think you should contribute. Call it a down payment on your debt. Before I could react, his hand shot out and grabbed the strap of my purse. He yanked it hard. The leather dug into my shoulder, but he was stronger than me. With a violent tug, he ripped the bag from my grasp. Hey, give that back, I hissed, lunging for it. He shoved me back against the wall with one hand while he rifled through my bag with the other. He dumped the contents onto the floor. My lipstick, my keys, my tampons, and a handful of loose change scattered across the carpet. He kicked aside my personal items, ignoring the violation he was committing. He snatched up my small, worn wallet and flipped it open. Empty, 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 he muttered, flipping through the card slots. God, you really are pathetic, Nia. Do you even have a bank account, or do you just keep your money in a sock? He found the bill tucked in the back fold. A single $20 bill. It was the last of my cash. It was money I had saved for gas to get to a temp agency next week. It was my literal lifeline to the outside world. Jackpot, he said, holding the bill up to the dim light. $20. Well, it is not much, but it will cover the tip. Marcus, please, I said, and for a second my voice cracked. That is all I have. I need gas money. If I cannot drive, I cannot get a job. You have a job, he said, stuffing the bill into his pocket. At the pawn shop. You do not need a car to walk downstairs to the store. Consider this rent for the month. You got off cheap. He tossed my empty wallet onto the floor on top of my scattered belongings. He looked at me with a smirk that made my skin crawl. It was the look of someone who knew he could get away with anything, because his parents had spent 3 decades letting him. Oh, and one more thing, he said as he started to turn away. I have the boys coming over tomorrow night for poker. We are going to need the living room, so I asked, staring at my ruined things on the floor. So the place is a dump, he said. Mom has been busy with the books, and Emily obviously cannot clean, she has her nails done. Since you are just sitting around crying about your failed life, you need to make yourself useful. He leaned in close, his breath hot on my face. I want the floors vacuumed, the windows wiped, and the bathroom scrubbed. And I mean really scrubbed, Nia. Last time I saw a ring in the toilet. If my friends see that, it reflects badly on me. And if I look bad, you are going to regret it. He tapped my cheek twice, a patronizing gesture that took every ounce of my willpower not to bite his finger off. Clean it up, he ordered, gesturing to my spilled purse. You are making a mess in my hallway. He turned and walked away, whistling a tune. I watched his broad back retreat into the living room. I heard the click of the TV remote and the sound of a football game starting. He had just robbed me. He had physically assaulted me. And now he was settling in to watch TV while I picked up my life from the floor. I slowly knelt down. My hands were shaking again, but this time it was not from fear. It was from a cold, calculated rage. I picked up my tampons. I picked up my keys. I picked up my empty wallet. As I gathered my things, I could feel the sharp corner of Grandma Hattie's letter pressing against my ribs. $20. He had taken $20 and thought he had won. He thought he had stripped me of my last resource. He did not know that the piece of paper in my bra was worth more than his entire life. He did not know that the pawn shop manager title he was so proud of was about to become meaningless. I stood up and looked toward the living room where the blue light of the television flickered. I will clean the house, Marcus, I whispered to the empty hallway. I will clean it so well you won't recognize it. I am going to scrub this entire family clean. I turned back to my room. I did not need water anymore. The fire in my belly was fueling me. I had work to do. If they wanted me to be the maid, I would play the part. I would play it until the curtain dropped and revealed who really owned the stage. Tomorrow was the poker night. Tomorrow was the signing ceremony. and tomorrow was the day the ground would crumble beneath their feet. I closed my door and sat at my desk. I pulled out the letter again. There was a phone number at the bottom, a direct line to Mr. Sterling's legal team. I picked up my phone. It was late, but I knew they would answer. The war had officially begun. The room they graciously allowed me to occupy was technically a converted pantry off the kitchen. It was narrow, windowless, and smelled faintly of old onions and damp drywall. My twin mattress took up 90% of the floor space, leaving just enough room for a small plastic crate that served as my nightstand. I sat cross-legged on the bed, pressing my back against the cold wall. My phone was in my hand, the screen cracked in the corner, a relic of the time Emily had knocked it out of my hand by accident and then refused to pay for the repair. I watched the signal bars in the upper right corner, flickering between one bar and searching. My parents had changed the Wi-Fi password 3 months ago, claiming that internet access was a luxury for paying tenants only. Marcus had laughed when he told me the new password was "Get a Jobnia," all lowercase. I refused to ask for it. Instead, I had discovered that if I pressed my phone against the southeast corner of the drywall, right where the paint was peeling the worst, I could leach a faint signal from the Henderson's router next door. I held my breath, waiting for the connection to stabilize. I needed to check my email. It was a masochistic ritual I performed every night before bed. I would scroll through the rejection letters, the automated responses, and the silence, hoping for a miracle that never came. Tonight felt different, though. Tonight I felt like a cornered animal, and cornered animals are desperate. The inbox loaded slowly, the little spinning circle mocking my anxiety. Delete. Spam. Delete. A rejection from a call center. Delete. A promotional email for discount tires. I felt the familiar weight of hopelessness settling in my chest. I was about to lock the screen and bury my face in the pillow when a new message popped up at the very top. It was not from a no-reply address. It was not a generic HR notification. The sender name made my heart skip a beat and then slam against my ribs. Executive Office of Arthur Sterling. I blinked, rubbing my eyes with the back of my hand. I must be hallucinating. The stress and the hunger were finally making me see things. Arthur Sterling was a legend. He was the CEO of Sterling Cybersec, the largest data protection firm on the East Coast. He was a black billionaire who had built an empire from scratch. A week ago, in a fit of late-night delirium, I had sent my resume to their general inquiry inbox. I had not even applied for a specific position. I just attached my transcript and a short cover letter that said, "I am better than what my resume says." My finger hovered over the subject line. Confidential interview request. I tapped it. The email opened. Dear Ms. Brooks, Mr. Sterling has personally reviewed your submission. He found your academic records in data encryption to be exceptional, specifically your senior thesis on blockchain vulnerabilities. He is not interested in your gap in employment. He is interested in your mind. He would like to meet with you personally this Monday at 800 hours. Please arrive 15 minutes early. Do not be late. Sincerely, Sarah Jenkins, Executive Assistant to the CEO. The phone slipped from my hand and landed on the mattress. I stared at the glowing screen, unable to breathe. The room seemed to tilt. I felt a sudden rush of vertigo, like the floor had just dropped out from under me. Monday. That was in 2 days. The CEO of the most powerful tech company in the city wanted to meet me. Me. The girl who had just been robbed of $20 by her brother. The girl who was eating 3-day-old meatloaf. I picked the phone up again, my hands trembling so hard I could barely read. I read it again. And again. He is not interested in your gap in employment. He is interested in your mind. For 3 years I had been told I was worthless. I had been told I was a thief, a liar, a burden. My own mother had put a price tag on my existence and told me I was in the red. And here was a stranger, a billionaire, looking at the same data and seeing value. A hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat, but I clamped my hand over my mouth to stifle it. I could not let them hear. If Marcus knew, he would sabotage it. If my parents knew, they would call Mr. Sterling and poison the well, just like they did with the logistics company. They would tell him I was unstable, that I was a criminal. I had to protect this. This was not just a job interview. This was a life raft in the middle of a hurricane. I stood up the small room, suddenly feeling too tight to contain the energy coursing through my veins. I paced the 3 feet of available floor space. I needed a plan. I needed to get there. My car had no gas, but I could figure that out. I could walk if I had to. I needed clothes. My blazer was old, but I could steam it in the shower when everyone was asleep. I looked at the walls of my pantry prison. For the first time in years, they did not look like the end of the world. They looked like a temporary inconvenience. I looked at the door, knowing my family was just on the other side, living their lives on my dime, thinking they had broken me. They had no idea. I sat back down and hit reply. I will be there. I hit send and watched the bar slide across the screen. Sent. I pulled Grandma Hattie's envelope out of my bra again. I held it up to the light of the phone screen. Mr. Sterling. The name on the email and the name of the company my grandmother had mentioned in her letters years ago. It could not be a coincidence. But Grandma was a cleaner. She scrubbed floors. How would she know a tech mogul? The mystery was deep and terrifying, but for the first time I was not afraid of the dark. I turned off my phone to save the battery. I lay back on the thin mattress, listening to the muffled sounds of the football game from the living room. Let them laugh. Let Marcus spend my $20. Let Emily make jokes about my genetics. Monday was coming. And when I walked into that office, I had a feeling I would not be walking out as the same person. I closed my eyes and visualized the skyline of Atlanta, not from the gutter where my family had kicked me, but from the top floor of the Sterling Tower. I was going to climb. And I was going to start by surviving the weekend. The master bedroom was directly above the pantry where I slept. It was the largest room in the house, the only one with an ensuite bathroom and a walk-in closet. Through the thin floorboards and the connected ventilation system, sound traveled with betraying clarity. While I was downstairs clutching my phone and dreaming of a new life, Emily was upstairs wide awake. She was sitting at her vanity table applying a $50 night cream that she had charged to the store business account. She paused mid-motion, her hand hovering over her cheek. Through the vent near the floor, she heard a muffled sound. It was me. In my excitement, I must have whispered the name Sterling out loud, or perhaps the squeak of my bed springs gave me away. But Emily heard something else. She heard hope. And to a woman like Emily, hope in someone she considered beneath her was a dangerous thing. She capped the jar of cream and turned to the bed where Marcus was snoring lightly. He was sprawled out, taking up most of the mattress, his mouth open. She reached over and shook his shoulder, not gently. "Marcus," she hissed, "wake up." He groaned, rolling over and burying his face in the pillow. "Leave me alone, Em. It is late." She dug her manicured nails into his bicep. "I said wake up. Your sister is up to something." Marcus blinked, his eyes open groggily. "What are you talking about?" "Nia is asleep. I took her money. She is crying in the pantry. Go back to sleep." "No, she is not crying," Emily said, standing up and pacing the length of the plush carpet. "I heard her. She was talking to someone. Or maybe she was reading something. I heard her say Sterling." "So what?" Marcus yawned, rubbing his face. "Maybe she is talking about sterling silver. Maybe she is praying. Who cares?" "You are an idiot," Emily snapped. "Sterling Cybersec, the biggest tech firm in Atlanta. Do not tell me you forgot that she applied there. I saw the browser history on the living room computer before you changed the password." She was looking up Arthur Sterling. Marcus sat up slowly, the fog of sleep clearing from his eyes. Arthur Sterling, the billionaire. Why would he hire her? She is a thief. We made sure everyone knows that. Because she is smart. Marcus, Emily said, her voice dripping with venom. We can call her a thief all we want, but if she gets in a room with someone like Sterling and shows him what she can do with those computers, he might look past it. And do you know what happens if she gets a job with a six-figure salary? She moves out. Marcus shrugged. Good riddance. More room for us. Emily stopped pacing and looked at her husband with genuine disbelief. She walked over to the bed and sat down on the edge, grabbing his face in her hands to force him to look at her. You truly are simple, aren't you? Think, Marcus. Think about where we are living. Whose name is on the deed to this house, really? It is still in your grandmother Hattie's name. The probate court never officially settled it because we told them Nia could not be located. We told the lawyers she was mentally unstable and unfit to inherit, so Marcus said, looking uneasy. So if she gets real money? Emily whispered, her eyes wide and manic. If she gets a corporate lawyer, they will dig. They will find out that Grandma Hattie actually left the house to the grandchild who showed the most promise. And they will find out that your parents have been forging signatures to keep the business running. If Nia gets power, she doesn't just move out. She evicts us. She puts your parents in jail for fraud. And she throws me out on the street. Marcus went pale. The reality of the situation finally pierced through his arrogance. He looked around the bedroom at the flat-screen TV on the wall. The expensive curtains, the life of comfort. He had done nothing to earn, but everything to keep. She cannot get that interview, he said, his voice trembling slightly. We have to stop her. We cannot just lock her in, Emily said, standing up again. She is desperate. She would climb out a window or call the police. We need to make sure she cannot get there. We need to make sure she misses the appointment. If she is a no-show, Sterling will write her off as unreliable. How do we do that? Marcus asked. Emily walked over to the window and pulled back the heavy curtain. Rain was lashing against the glass. Down in the driveway, under the yellow glow of the street lamp, sat my old sedan. It was a rust bucket, but it ran. It was the only thing giving me mobility. She has a car, Emily said softly. A car needs tires to move. Marcus followed her gaze. He looked at the car and then back at his wife. It was a silent exchange of understanding, a pact of mutual survival rooted in malice. It is pouring rain out there, Marcus complained, but he was already throwing off the covers. Do you want to be homeless? Emily asked, crossing her arms. Do you want to explain to your poker buddies why you are living in a motel? Marcus gritted his teeth. He stood up and walked over to the closet. He pushed aside the piles of designer sneakers he had bought with skimmed money and reached into the back. He pulled out a heavy red metal toolbox. It clanked loudly as he set it down on the floor. I will need the lug wrench, he muttered, opening the latch. And maybe the jack. I am not just going to flatten them. I am going to make sure that car never moves again without $1,000 in repairs. Good. Emily purred, watching him. Make sure you do all four. If she tries to fix one, she will realize she is stuck. By the time she figures out a bus route, she will be hours late. Sterling is a military man. He does not tolerate tardiness. Marcus pulled on a dark hoodie and grabbed the heavy iron tire iron. He weighed it in his hand. The metal was cold and unforgiving. He looked at his reflection in the mirror. He did not look like a brother. He looked like a criminal. But he told himself it was necessary. It was self-defense. She brought this on herself, he said, convincing himself. If she just signed the contract and worked at the shop, none of this would be happening. She is the one being difficult. Exactly, Emily said, walking over and kissing him on the cheek. We are just helping her accept her place in the world. Now go. And be quiet. The rain will cover the noise. Marcus nodded. He zipped up his hoodie and picked up the toolbox. He moved toward the bedroom door, stepping lightly so the floorboards would not creak. Emily watched him go, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. She turned off the light and climbed back into the warm bed, listening to the sound of the rain and waiting for the sound of metal grinding against metal. Downstairs, I was sleeping, clutching my hope to my chest, unaware that upstairs the executioners had already signed the warrant. The sabotage was in motion, and the morning was going to bring a devastation I never saw coming. Monday morning arrived in shades of gray and violent charcoal. The alarm on my phone vibrated at 4:30 in the morning, but I was already awake. I had spent the night staring at the ceiling, rehearsing my answers to questions Mr. Sterling might not even ask. I slipped out of bed and shivered. The air in the pantry was damp and cold, seeping into my bones. I moved silently like a ghost in a house that wanted to exorcise me. I retrieved my blazer from the bathroom where I had hung it the night before, hoping the steam from a hot shower would release the wrinkles. It looked decent. Not perfect, but respectable. I put on my white blouse, buttoning it all the way to the top, to hide the hollow of my throat, where my pulse was already hammering. I stepped into my black trousers, which were slightly loose at the waist, a testament to weeks of rationing food. Finally, I slid my feet into my only pair of heels. They were scuffed at the toes, but I had colored them in with a black Sharpie, hoping no one would notice. I grabbed my portfolio, which contained nothing but a notepad and the printout of the email from Sarah Jenkins. I did not need a purse. Marcus had emptied it anyway. I had my keys and I had my desperation. That was enough. I crept through the kitchen, avoiding the squeaky floorboard near the refrigerator. The house was silent. The heavy snoring of my father drifted down from upstairs, mingling with the rhythmic drumming of rain against the roof. It was a storm. A heavy, relentless Georgia downpour that turned the world into a blur of water and mud. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I had an umbrella in the trunk of my car. I just needed to get to the car. I unlocked the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The wind hit me instantly, whipping my hair across my face and spraying mist onto my glasses. I looked toward the driveway, expecting to see the familiar silhouette of my beat-up Toyota Camry. The car was there, but something was wrong. It sat oddly low to the ground, like a beast that had been crippled. I squinted through the rain and took a step closer, shielding my eyes with my hand. My stomach dropped. The car was not resting on rubber, it was resting on 4 stacks of red cinder blocks. My tires were gone, all 4 of them. I stood frozen on the porch, the rain blowing onto my suit, soaking the fabric I had tried so hard to protect. I stared at the empty wheel wells. The lug nuts were missing, the rims were gone. It was a professional job. Or at least a job done by someone who knew exactly where the toolkit was kept. Car trouble. The voice came from the shadows of the porch swing. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. I turned to see my father Desmond sitting there. He was fully dressed in his work clothes, holding a steaming mug of coffee. He was rocking slowly back and forth, the creak of the wood blending with the sound of the storm. "Dad," I whispered. "My tires. They are gone." "I see that," he said calmly, taking a sip of his coffee. He did not get up to inspect the damage. He did not look angry. He looked satisfied. "Shame, really. This neighborhood is going to the dogs. You leave something out overnight, and the vultures pick it clean." I looked at him and then back at the car. The rain was washing away the mud around the blocks, but I could see footprints, heavy boot prints that led from the car straight to the side of the house where the garage entrance was. Marcus's boots. "It wasn't thieves, Dad," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "It was Marcus. I know he has a set of cinder blocks in the garage. I saw them last week." Desmond chuckled, a low, dry sound. "Accusing your brother now. You really are desperate, Nia. Marcus has been asleep all night. I have been up since 4 watching the storm. I did not see anyone. He was lying. He was lying to my face, protecting the son who stole from me, while sabotaging the daughter who was trying to save herself." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. The rain was dripping off my nose now, mixing with the hot tears I refused to acknowledge. "Why do you want me to fail so badly?" "I am not making you fail, Nia," Desmond said, standing up. He walked to the edge of the porch, looking down at me with pity that felt like a slap. "God is telling you something. Look at this. The storm, the car, the blocked road. It is a sign. You are not meant to go to that fancy office. You are meant to stay here where you belong." He gestured toward the front door. "Come inside. Dry off. The pawn shop opens in 3 hours. If you start now, you can mop the floors before the first customer comes in. I will even give you an advance on your allowance so you can buy some lunch. I looked at the open door. It was warm inside. It smelled of coffee and safety. It was a trap. If I walked back through that door, I would never leave. I would sign the contract. I would become the bitter woman behind the counter, fading away until I was just a ghost in my own life. I looked at the clock on my phone. 6:15. The interview was at 8. The Sterling headquarters was 5 miles away, a 15-minute drive, or a 90-minute walk. "I am not coming inside," I said. Desmond stopped his hand on the doorknob. "Don't be stupid. You have no car. You have no money for a taxi. What are you going to do, fly?" "I am going to the interview," I said. I stepped off the porch into the pouring rain. The cold water soaked through my blazer instantly. My shoes sank into the mud of the driveway. Desmond laughed. "Walk then. Go ahead. Walk 5 miles in a storm in cheap heels. You will look like a drowned rat when you get there. They will laugh you out of the building before you even open your mouth." I did not turn back. I did not give him the satisfaction of seeing the fear in my eyes. I started walking. I walked past the car on blocks, past the house that had been my prison, and onto the main road. The wind pushed against me, trying to force me back, but I leaned into it. Let it rain. Let the mud ruin my shoes. Let my father laugh. I had a letter in my bra and a fire in my chest. I was going to meet Arthur Sterling, even if I had to crawl on my hands and knees to get there. As I turned the corner and the house disappeared from view, I started to run, one step at a time, pacing myself. 5 miles to freedom. 5 miles. In a car, it takes 10 minutes. On foot, in a torrential Georgia storm, it is an eternity. I ran along the shoulder of the highway because there were no sidewalks in this part of town. The wind was a physical weight pushing against my chest, trying to shove me back toward the pawn shop. Every time a semi-truck roared past, it sent a wave of dirty, oily water crashing over me. My white blouse was no longer white. It was a translucent gray clinging to my skin like a second layer of shame. My lungs burned. I could taste the metallic tang of blood in the back of my throat. I had not run like this since high school track, but back then I was wearing sneakers and running toward a finish line tape. Now I was running toward my life wearing discount pumps that were disintegrating with every step. At mile 2, the blister on my left heel burst. I felt the warm slide of fluid, but I did not stop. I focused on the rhythm of my breathing. In, out, survive, advance. I visualized my father sitting on the porch, rocking back and forth, waiting for me to come crawling back. I visualized Marcus laughing as he loosened the lug nuts on my car. That anger was better than fuel. It was a narcotic that numbed the pain in my legs. At mile 3, disaster struck. I stepped into a pothole concealed by a puddle. There was a sickening crack, not of bone but of cheap plastic. My right heel snapped off completely, sending me sprawling onto the wet asphalt. I landed hard on my hands and knees, the gravel digging into my palms. I stayed there for a second, on all fours, gasping for air, while the rain hammered against my back. A car drove past and honked a long, aggressive sound that screamed, "Get out of the road, trash." I looked at the broken shoe. It was useless. I looked at the other one. It was still intact. I could not run with one heel. I took the shoe off. I held it in my hand, feeling the weight of it. Then I smashed it against the pavement. Once. Twice. Until the left heel snapped off too. I put the ruined flats back on my feet. They were slippery and offered no support, but they were level. I stood up. My knees were bleeding. My suit was ruined. But I was still moving. I checked my phone. 7:45. I had 15 minutes to cover the last 2 miles. I started running again, ignoring the stitch in my side that felt like a knife twisting between my ribs. I ran past the strip malls and the fast food joints. I ran past the bus stops where people huddled under umbrellas looking at me like I was insane. Maybe I was. Or maybe for the first time in my life, I was completely sane. Then I saw it. The Sterling Tower. It rose out of the gray mist like a monolith of glass and steel. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It looked like a fortress built for gods, not for a girl covered in mud and street grit. I sprinted the last block. My legs were jelly. My chest was heaving so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I reached the massive glass revolving doors at exactly 7:58. I stopped for a split second to catch my reflection. I looked like a disaster. My hair was plastered to my skull. Mascara was running down my cheeks in dark, jagged lines. My suit was soaked and stained with mud. I did not look like an executive. I looked like a woman who had just crawled out of a swamp. But underneath the filth, my eyes were blazing. I pushed through the revolving door and stepped into the lobby. The silence was instant. The roar of the storm vanished, replaced by the soft hum of air conditioning and low classical music. The air smelled of expensive leather and floor wax. Everything stopped. People in tailored suits turned to stare. The receptionist stopped typing. A security guard, who looked like he was carved out of granite, stepped out from behind the desk. He was massive, wearing a uniform that cost more than my entire wardrobe. He blocked my path, his hand resting on his belt. "Excuse me, ma'am," he boomed, his voice echoing in the cavernous lobby. "Deliveries are in the back, and you need to clear out. We do not allow panhandling in here." I stopped. I tried to speak, but my throat was so dry only a croak came out. I swallowed hard and straightened my spine. I was not a panhandler. I was a shareholder. I just didn't have the certificate yet. "I am not here for a delivery," I rasped. My voice was rough but steady. "I have an appointment with Arthur Sterling." The guard laughed. It was a short, dismissive sound. "Sure you do, honey. And I have a lunch date with Oprah. Now turn around and walk out before I have to drag you out. You are dripping mud on the marble." He took a step toward me, reaching for my arm. He saw a homeless woman. He saw a nuisance. He did not see the fire. I stepped back, pulling my portfolio from under my soaked blazer. The leather was ruined, but the inside was dry. I ripped out the printout of the email. "Check the schedule," I said, holding the paper up. My hand was shaking, but I held it high. "My name is Nia Brooks. I have an 8 o'clock meeting. If you throw me out, you better be prepared to explain to Mr. Sterling why his guest was removed from the building." The guard hesitated. He looked at the paper, then at me. He looked at the mud on the floor. "I don't care what piece of paper you have," he sneered. "Look at you. You are a mess. Mr. Sterling does not see people who look like they slept in a dumpster." "I am not leaving," I said. "Call his office. Call Sarah Jenkins." The guard's face hardened. "I gave you a chance." He reached for his radio, but before he could speak, the elevator doors behind him pinged open. A hush fell over the lobby. It was not just an elevator opening. It was an entrance. I looked past the guard's shoulder. A man walked out. He was tall, with silver hair and a presence that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. He was wearing a three-piece suit that was tailored to perfection. He did not look at the guard. He did not look at the receptionist. He looked straight at me. It was him. Arthur Sterling. The guard turned around, realizing the silence. "Mr. Sterling?" he stammered. "I was just removing this woman. She claims she has an appointment, but obviously—" Arthur Sterling held up a hand. The guard shut his mouth instantly. The CEO walked across the lobby, his polished shoes clicking on the marble. He stopped 3 feet away from me. He looked at my muddy shoes. He looked at my wet hair. He looked at the mascara running down my face. Then he looked me in the eye. He did not look disgusted. He looked impressed. "You ran," he said. It was not a question. "My car had no tires," I said. My voice was stronger now. "I didn't want to be late." Arthur Sterling smiled. It was a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You are 2 minutes early," he said. He turned to the guard, who was now pale and trembling. "Stand down, Marcus. This is the most important meeting of my day." He turned back to me and gestured toward the elevators. "After you, Ms. Brooks. And do not worry about the floor. Mud washes off. Tardiness does not. I walked past the stunned guard. I walked past the staring receptionist. I walked into the elevator next to a billionaire, leaving a trail of muddy footprints on the pristine marble. The doors closed, shutting out the world that had tried to stop me. I was inside. And for the first time in 3 years, I was rising. The elevator ride to the 50th floor was the longest minute of my life. I stood in the corner of the small metal box, trying to make myself as small as possible. Beside me, Arthur Sterling stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the floor numbers climb. He did not speak. He did not look at the puddle of muddy water forming around my broken shoes. The silence was not awkward. It was heavy. It was the kind of silence that precedes a judgment that will change your life forever. When the doors slid open with a soft chime, I almost gasped. The executive suite was not an office. It was a palace of glass and light. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the storm-battered city below. The furniture was sleek, modern, and white. Everything was white. The carpet, the leather chairs, the expansive desk. It was a room designed for people who never got dirty, and I was standing there looking like I had just crawled out of a sewer. Mr. Sterling walked out first. He gestured for me to follow. I hesitated. My feet felt heavy like lead weights. Every step I took left a dark smear on the pristine white marble floor. I looked down at the trail of filth I was leaving and felt a fresh wave of humiliation. "Come in," Ms. Brooks, Sterling said. His voice was calm, authoritative. "Do not worry about the floor. We have people for that." I stepped into his private office. A woman was sitting at a smaller desk near the window, typing furiously. She looked up as we entered. It was Sarah Jenkins, the woman who had emailed me. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. She looked from my wet hair to my ruined shoes, and then to her boss. "Mr. Sterling," she began, half rising from her chair. "Should I call maintenance? Or perhaps security?" "No," Sarah Sterling said, walking behind his massive desk. "You should call catering. 2 coffees, black, and bring a towel." He sat down and swiveled his chair to face me. I was standing in the middle of the room, shivering slightly from the air conditioning, which blasted against my soaked clothes. I clutched my portfolio to my chest like a shield. "Please sit," he said, pointing to one of the white leather chairs opposite him. I looked at the chair. It looked like it cost more than my parents' house. "Mr. Sterling, I cannot. I will ruin it." "Sit," he repeated. It was not a suggestion. I sat. I perched on the edge of the seat, flinching as the wet fabric of my trousers squished against the leather. I waited for him to speak. I waited for him to ask why I looked like this. I waited for him to ask about the accusations my father had made. Instead, he opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a square of folded fabric. He leaned across the desk and held it out to me. It was a handkerchief. Not a paper tissue, but a square of heavy purple silk with his initials embroidered in gold thread. "Wipe your face, Ms. Brooks," he said gently. "You have mud on your cheek." I took the silk. It felt cool and expensive in my rough hand. I dabbed at my face, trying to wipe away the grime and the mascara tracks. "I am sorry," I whispered. My voice was raspy. "My car, my family. It is complicated. I did not mean to disrespect your office by coming here like this." Arthur Sterling watched me clean my face. His expression softened. A ghost of a smile played on his lips. "Your grandmother Hattie hated dirty shoes," he said. I froze. The hand holding the silk handkerchief stopped mid-air. I lowered it slowly and stared at him. "You knew her?" I asked. Sterling leaned back in his chair, tenting his fingers. "Knew her. Ms. Brooks. I would not be sitting in this chair if it were not for Hattie Mae Brooks." I was confused. My grandmother was a cleaner. She scrubbed floors and emptied trash cans in downtown office buildings for 40 years. She lived in a small walk-up apartment and smelled of bleach and peppermint. "But she was a cleaner," I stammered. "She worked for the maintenance company." Sterling nodded. "Yes, she did. She cleaned the boardrooms of the biggest banks and law firms in this city. And do you know what happens in boardrooms, Ms. Brooks? Men like me talk. We talk about mergers, we talk about stocks, we talk about hostile takeovers. We think the people emptying the trash are invisible. We think they are part of the furniture. He stood up and walked to the window looking out at the gray sky. But Hattie was not invisible, he continued. She was listening. She had a mind like a steel trap. She understood leverage better than any MBA graduate I have ever hired. 30 years ago, when I was a young man trying to start this company, nobody would give me a loan. The banks laughed at a black man talking about cybersecurity before the internet was even a household term. He turned back to face me, his eyes intense. One night I was working late in a rented office. I had my head in my hands ready to quit. Hattie came in to mop the floor. She saw my spreadsheets. She saw the red ink. She leaned on her mop and asked me why I was betting against the Japanese yen. I stared at him, my mouth slightly open. Grandma Hattie did not finish high school. Sterling chuckled. That is what she wanted people to think. That night we talked for 3 hours. She pointed out a flaw in my risk assessment model that 3 partner-level accountants had missed. She gave me $50 from her apron pocket. She told me to buy a specific stock that she had heard 2 CEOs discussing earlier that day. He walked back to the desk and placed his hands on the surface, leaning toward me. I turned that $50 into $5,000. Then, $50,000. Hattie did not just clean offices, Nia. She was my silent partner. She was the smartest investor I have ever known, and she told me everything about you. Me, I whispered. But I was just a child when she died. She watched you, he said. She told me about the little girl who fixed the VCR when the adults could not figure it out. She told me about the girl who did math homework for fun. She knew you had the gift, and she knew about your parents. His face darkened when he mentioned them. The warmth vanished, replaced by a cold, hard edge. She knew they were vultures, he said. She knew that if they ever found out she had money, they would pick her bones clean. So we made a pact. She lived simply. She invested every penny of her dividends back into this company. She built a legacy in the shadows so that one day you could step into the light. Sarah Jenkins walked in at that moment carrying a silver tray with 2 steaming cups of coffee and a fluffy white towel. She set it down on the desk and backed away quickly, sensing the intensity of the conversation. Sterling pushed a cup toward me. "Drink," he said. "You look like you are about to pass out." I took the cup. My hands were shaking so hard the china rattled against the saucer. I took a sip. The hot, bitter liquid burned my throat, grounding me. Why now, I asked. Why wait 10 years? Because Hattie was a strategist, Sterling said. She knew that if I gave you this money when you were 18, your parents would have coerced you into signing it over. They would have guilted you. They would have used the Bible and family duty to rob you blind. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. He placed it on the desk, but kept his hand on it. She wanted you to see them for who they really are. First, he said. She wanted you to hit rock bottom, because it is only when you are at the bottom, when you have been stripped of everything, that you find out who you really are. He looked at my muddy clothes, my broken shoes, my defiant eyes. She told me to wait until you were desperate but not broken, he said. She told me to wait until you showed up. Today, when security told me there was a woman in the lobby covered in mud demanding a meeting, I knew it was time. You did not give up, Nia. You ran 5 miles in a storm because you refused to let them win. Hattie was right about you. He slid the folder across the desk. This is not a job offer, Ms. Brooks. I mean, I am going to hire you, obviously. You are brilliant. But this meeting is about something else. This is about the inheritance your grandmother hid from the world. I looked at the folder. It was thick, heavy. Open it, Sterling said softly. It is time to level the playing field. I reached out. My hand was still dirty, my fingernails rimmed with mud, but as I touched the clean manila paper, I didn't feel ashamed anymore. I felt a surge of power. Grandma Hattie had been playing a long game. She had been a spy in the house of the enemy, and now from beyond the grave she was handing me the weapon I needed to win the war. I flipped the cover open, and my breath stopped. The first document in the folder was not a will, it was a stock certificate. The paper was yellowed with age, the edges slightly frayed, but the gold seal at the bottom was pristine. It was dated 15 years ago. I scanned the lines, my brain struggling to process the numbers. 10,000 shares. Class A preferred stock. Initial buy-in price 50 cents per share. I looked up at Mr. Sterling. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought he could hear it. This says she bought 10,000 shares, I said, my voice trembling. But Grandma Hattie made minimum wage. She used to reuse tea bags to save money. She walked to work because she said the bus fare was a waste. How could she afford this? Sterling smiled, a look of deep respect in his eyes. He leaned back, tenting his fingers. She didn't just reuse tea bags, Nia. She lived on almost nothing. Your parents thought she was cheap. They used to make fun of her worn-out coats and her shoes that were held together with glue. I remember your father Desmond coming to pick her up from work once. He sat in his car and honked the horn because he didn't want to be seen standing next to his mother in her cleaning uniform. I flinched. I remembered that. I remembered sitting in the back seat listening to my father complain that Grandma smelled like industrial cleaner. What Desmond didn't know, Sterling continued, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper, was that every Friday Hattie took her paycheck, cashed it, kept $20 for groceries, and brought the rest to me. He stood up and walked over to a small safe built into the wall behind his desk. He punched in a code and the heavy door swung open. He pulled out a small battered notebook. It was one of those cheap composition books with the black and white marble cover, the kind kids use in elementary school. He placed it on the desk in front of me. Read the entry from November 1998, he said. I opened the notebook. The pages were crinkled and smelled faintly of peppermint oil, Grandma's scent. I recognized her handwriting immediately. It was jagged and sharp, the handwriting of a woman who didn't have time for cursive loops. November 12th, 1998. I read aloud. Desmond asked for money for a new television. Told him no. He called me a miser. Put $80 into Arthur's server expansion fund instead. That boy is going to change the world, and I am going to own a piece of it. I turned the page. July 2001. Patricia wants me to sign over the deed to the house. Says I am too old to manage it. I told her the house stays in my name. Bought another 500 shares of Sterling Tech. Let them think I am poor. It is safer that way. Wolves don't hunt skeletons. Tears pricked my eyes. Wolves don't hunt skeletons. She had played the part of the destitute old woman perfectly, creating a shield of poverty to protect the fortune she was building for me. She was my first investor, Sterling said softly. When I started this company, I was working out of a basement. Investors laughed at me. They saw a young black man with big ideas and empty pockets. But Hattie saw the math. She would come in to empty the trash cans and she would stop and look at my whiteboards. She asked questions that made my engineers sweat. She understood data flow better than people with PhDs. He pointed to the stock certificate. She bought those shares when they were worth pennies. Today, Sterling Cybersec trades at $200 a share. And because she bought Class A preferred stock, she didn't just buy equity, she bought voting rights. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. Do you understand what that means, Nia? Your grandmother didn't just leave you money, she left you power. She owns, and now you own 15% of this company. You are not just an applicant, you are my boss. I stared at him. The room seemed to spin. Me, the girl who had just been forced to smash the heels off her shoes to run here, I was his boss. But why didn't she tell them? I asked, my voice cracking. Why did she let them treat her like that? They put her in a nursing home at the end. They sold her furniture. They treated her like a burden. Because she knew them, Sterling said, his face hardening. He walked back to the window and looked out at the storm. She knew that if she showed even a hint of wealth, they would have drained her dry. They would have guilted her, manipulated her, or declared her incompetent to take control of her assets. She sacrificed her comfort, her dignity, and her quality of life to make sure this envelope stayed sealed until you were ready. He turned back to me. She told me that the day you walked into this office would be the day the clock started ticking. She said, Arthur, don't give it to her until she has seen the teeth of the wolves. When she knows what it feels like to be hunted, then give her the gun. He nodded at the folder. There is more, Nia. That stock certificate is just the foundation. The real weapon is underneath. It's a document concerning a certain property on Oak Street, a property that currently houses a pawn shop. I froze. The pawn shop, my parents' pride and joy, the business they lorded over me. Grandma didn't own the shop, I said. Dad bought it 10 years ago. Sterling smiled, and it was a dangerous, predatory smile. Your father thinks he bought it. He thinks he pays a mortgage to a blind trust managed by a nameless bank. But he never looked at who founded the trust. I slowly lifted the stock certificate to reveal the document beneath it. It was a deed of trust. And there, in black and white, was the name of the beneficiary, the Hattie Mae Brooks Revocable Trust. My father didn't own the building. He didn't own the land. For 10 years, he had been paying rent to his own mother, and now he was paying it to me. Sterling leaned forward, his voice low and intense. Your grandmother bought the note on that building when the previous owner went bankrupt. She has been your father's landlord for a decade. And according to this trust, you have the right to call in the loan or evict the tenant for any violation of the lease. I looked at the document, and then I thought about the contract my mother had tried to force me to sign. The 10 years of slavery. The $120,000 debt. They wanted to own me. But the whole time Grandma Hattie had ensured that I already owned them. I felt a laugh bubbling up in my chest. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was dark, jagged, and full of sharp edges, so I whispered, running my finger over Grandma's signature. They are living in my house, they are working in my building, and they are driving on tires bought with my money. Precisely, Sterling said. And now, Miss Brooks, the question is not whether you get the job. The question is, what are you going to do with your tenants? I picked up the smaller envelope that sat beneath the deed. The paper was thick parchment, the kind that felt expensive and permanent. On the back, a glob of red wax held the flap shut, stamped with the impression of a small key. It was Grandma Hattie's signature seal. She used to joke that she held the keys to the city, but I never realized how literal she was being. My hands trembled as I broke the wax. It snapped with a crisp sound that echoed in the quiet office. Inside was a single sheet of handwritten stationery. My dearest Nia. The letter began. If you are reading this, then my heart has finally stopped beating, and your parents have finally started showing their true colors. I am sorry I could not give this to you while I was alive. I wanted to. Lord knows I wanted to hand you the world on a silver platter. But I knew that if I gave you honey while you were surrounded by bears, you would only get stung. Desmond and Patricia are my blood, but they are vultures. They circle and they wait for weakness. I saw how they treated you when you were little. I saw how they took your birthday money to pay their cable bill. I saw how they made you feel small so they could feel big. I traced the loops of her handwriting. I could almost hear her voice rasping and warm, reading the words to me. You were always the smart one, Nia. You were the only one who asked me about my day and actually listened. You were the only one who didn't look at my cleaning uniform with shame. So I made sure that the fruit of my labor would go to the one who respected the roots. Arthur Sterling and I built a fortress to protect you. The stock certificate you just saw is your shield. 15% of Sterling Cybersec. That is enough money to buy and sell every person who ever looked down on you. It gives you a seat at the table. It gives you a voice that cannot be silenced. I looked up at Mr. Sterling. He was watching me intently, his expression somber. Read the next paragraph, he said softly. That is the sword. I looked back down at the letter. But stocks take time to liquidate, Nia, and I know that when you get this, you will be in the middle of a war. Your parents will try to trap you. They will try to use debt and obligation to chain you to that pawn shop. They will say you owe them for your existence. So I bought their chains. I frowned, scanning the lines. 10 years ago, when Desmond wanted to expand the pawn shop, he could not get a loan. His credit was ruined from gambling. He went to a private lender. That lender was a shell company I created called HMB Holdings, Hattie Mae Brooks Holdings. I approved the loan. I also bought the mortgage on the house from the bank when they were about to foreclose in 2015. My breath hitched. I read the sentence again to be sure. I own the note on the shop and I own the mortgage on the house. They have been writing checks to me every month for a decade, thinking they were paying a bank. But here is the catch. The loan agreement has a character clause. It states that the borrower must maintain good standing in the community and refrain from any criminal activity, including fraud or harassment. It also states that the lender has the right to call in the full balance of the loan immediately if these terms are violated. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. A character clause. Grandma Hattie had trapped them. She knew. She knew that sooner or later they would slip up. She knew they would break the law or try to hurt someone. You are the sole beneficiary of HMB Holdings, the letter continued. That means you are their landlord, you are their bank. You are the creditor they fear. If they have hurt you, Nia, if they have tried to ruin your name or steal your future, you have the right to foreclose. You have the right to take the shop. You have the right to take the house. Do not hesitate. Do not feel guilty. They never felt guilty when they took from you. Use this power to free yourself. I love you, my sweet girl. Now go show them what a Brooks woman is really made of. I lowered the letter. The silence in the room was absolute. I looked at the deed again. The address of the house where I slept in a pantry. The address of the pawn shop where my father sat on his throne. It all belonged to me. Every brick. Every shingle. Every inch of floor that Marcus had ordered me to scrub. Mr. Sterling slid a black binder across the desk. This contains the loan documents, he said, and the payment history. Your father is currently 3 months behind on the shop payments. He has been skimming profits to pay for Marcus's gambling debts. Technically, they are already in default. He opened the binder to a page marked with a red tab. And this, he said, pointing to a clause. This is the acceleration clause. If you sign here, you authorize the legal team to demand full repayment of the loan within 24 hours. If they cannot pay, and we know they cannot, we begin asset seizure immediately. I looked at the signature line. It was waiting for me. My name was typed underneath it. Nia Brooks, President, HMB Holdings. I thought about the cinder blocks under my car. I thought about the 3-day-old meatloaf. I thought about the $120,000 bill my mother had presented to me. They wanted to play a game of debt. They wanted to talk about who owed who. I picked up the pen. It was a heavy silver fountain pen. It felt like a weapon in my hand. They think I am a thief, I said quietly. My voice did not sound like my own. It sounded older, stronger. It sounded like Hattie. Sterling nodded. They projected their own sins onto you. I uncapped the pen. The ink was black, dark as night. I am not going to sign it yet, I said. Sterling raised an eyebrow, surprised. No, why not? Because if I sign it now, they just lose the house, I said. They will spin it. They will say they were victims of a bank error. They will lie to the community. I looked at Sterling, my eyes cold and focused. I want them to know it was me. I want them to look me in the eye when the gavel comes down. My mother gave me a deadline. She said I had to sign her contract by tomorrow morning. She wants a public surrender. She wants me to crawl. I closed the binder. So, I am going to give her a show. I will go back. I will play the defeated daughter one last time. And then at the party tomorrow night, when everyone is watching, I will sign this. But I won't be signing her contract. I will be signing their eviction. Arthur Sterling leaned back in his chair, and a slow smile spread across his face. He looked at the portrait of Grandma Hattie on his credenza, and then back at me. That is cold, he said. Hattie would have loved it. I stood up. My clothes were still damp. My shoes were broken, but I felt 10 feet tall. I tucked the letter and the binder into my portfolio. I need one favor, Mr. Sterling, I said. Name it. I need a ride home. And I need you to lend me a car. Not a limousine. Something that looks like a fleet vehicle. I need to arrive looking like I failed. Consider it done, Sterling said, pressing a button on his intercom. I walked to the door. I was walking back into the lion's den. But this time, the lions didn't know that the lamb was coming back to eat them. The hunter had become the hunted, and tomorrow night the slaughter would begin. Mr. Sterling led me down a long glass corridor to a conference room at the end of the hall. The room was stark and intimidating, dominated by a long mahogany table and a wall of screens displaying real-time financial data. Three men in dark suits stood up in unison as we entered. They looked like sharks in expensive tailoring. "This is the cleanup crew," Sterling said, gesturing to the men. "Gentlemen, meet your new client, Ms. Nia Brooks." The man at the head of the table stepped forward. He was older, with steel-gray hair and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. "Ms. Brooks, I am Jonathan Vance, head of corporate litigation. We have been managing the HMB Trust for your grandmother for the past decade. We have been waiting for the green light to act." I sat down at the head of the table. The leather chair was high-backed and made me feel like a judge taking the bench. Vance pressed a button on a remote and the screens on the wall flickered to life. A complex diagram appeared looking like a spiderweb of red lines. In the center was a picture of the pawn shop. "We call this the kill switch," Vance said, his voice devoid of emotion. He pointed a laser pointer at the screen. "Your parents believe they are successful business owners. The reality is that they are hemorrhaging money. They have been surviving on lines of credit and willful ignorance." He clicked the remote and a document zoomed in on the screen. It was a tax lien. "Strike one," Vance said. "They have not paid property taxes on the commercial building in 2 years. They have been intercepted by the county, but the trust stepped in and paid the lien to prevent a public auction." "Wait," I interrupted, leaning forward. "You paid their taxes." "We bought the tax lien," Vance corrected. "In the eyes of the law, the county no longer has a claim on the property. We do, and because they haven't reimbursed the trust, that debt is now secured by the equity in the building." He clicked again. A bank statement appeared. "Strike two, the operational line of credit. This is the money they use to buy inventory from desperate people. The bank was going to cut them off 6 months ago due to irregular cash flow. HMB Holdings purchased that debt portfolio. Every time your father swipes his business credit card to buy gas or dinner, he is borrowing money from you." I stared at the screen. My father, the man who lectured me about financial responsibility, the man who charged me interest on my childhood meals, was living entirely on my charity. "And here is the coup de grace," Vance said. He brought up a final document. It was the loan agreement for the pawn shop's expansion. This contract has a strict covenant regarding solvency. It states that if the borrower's debt-to-income ratio exceeds a certain threshold, the lender has the right to freeze all operating accounts immediately to protect the asset. Vance looked at me, his expression grim. "Ms. Brooks, your brother's gambling debts have pushed them over that threshold. He has been taking cash directly from the register and listing it as miscellaneous expenses. We have the forensic accounting to prove it." "So what does that mean?" I asked. "In practical terms, it means," Vance said, sliding a thick document toward me, "that you have the power to stop their hearts, financially speaking." He opened the document to a page marked with a yellow flag. "This is a notice of immediate default and asset freeze. If you execute this document, we send a digital signal to the merchant services provider. Within 10 minutes, their credit card terminals will stop working. We send a notice to the bank and their business checking account locks down. They won't be able to buy a cup of coffee, let alone run a business." And then I asked. "And then we foreclose," Vance said simply. "We change the locks. We seize the inventory to pay off the debt. We evict the residents of the residential property attached to the loan. That means the house." I looked at the paper. It was terrifying. It was a button that once pressed would detonate their entire world. "They have no idea," I asked. None. Sterling spoke up from the corner of the room. "They think HMB Holdings is just a faceless corporation in Delaware. They don't know it stands for Hattie Mae Brooks. They don't know the wolf at the door is actually the sheep they kicked out." I ran my hand over the cool paper. I thought about the way Emily had sneered at me. I thought about Marcus stealing my last $20. I thought about my mother calculating the cost of my dental work. They had monetized my life. It was only fair that I monetized their destruction. "Prepare the documents," I said, looking up at Vance. but do not file them yet. Vance paused. When do you want us to execute tomorrow night? I said. At 8 o'clock. They are throwing a party to celebrate 30 years of business. They invited the mayor. They invited the local news. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. I want the credit card machines to die right in the middle of the toast. I want the lights to flicker. And I want to be the one to hand my father the eviction notice while he is holding a glass of champagne. Vance smiled. It was a shark smile. We can arrange for a process server to accompany you, he said. No, I said. I don't need a process server. I need a bodyguard. Because when I tell Desmond Brooks that he is trespassing on my property, he is going to try to kill me. Sterling nodded to Vance. Get the paperwork ready and call the security team. Ms. Brooks is going to war. I walked out of the conference room. The weight of the portfolio under my arm felt different now. It wasn't just paper, it was a gavel, and I was ready to deliver the verdict. Mr. Sterling's fleet manager had given me a beige sedan that smelled of stale cigarettes and pine air freshener. It was a nondescript vehicle with a dent in the rear bumper and a check engine light that flickered on the dashboard. It was perfect. It was the car of a woman who had been defeated by life. As I pulled into the driveway, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the world gray and dripping. I killed the engine and sat for a moment gripping the steering wheel. I looked at the house. My house. The peeling paint and the overgrown lawn no longer looked like signs of my family's neglect. They looked like assets in a portfolio I was about to liquidate. I took a deep breath and slumped my shoulders, intentionally curving my spine to look smaller. I messed up my hair a little more and practiced a look of vacant hopelessness in the rearview mirror. It was showtime. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the living room. The air was thick with the smell of fried chicken and the sound of a game show blaring on the television. My mother was sitting in her usual spot on the sofa, going over a stack of receipts. Emily was curled up in the armchair, painting her toenails a bright crimson red. Marcus was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding with his poker buddies or spending the money he had stolen from me. Emily looked up as I entered. She capped the nail polish bottle slowly and surveyed my muddy clothes and my broken shoes. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a predator who sees a limping gazelle. Well, look who it is, she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. The executive returns. My mother looked up over her reading glasses. She did not ask if I was okay. She scanned my face, looking for the answer that would profit her the most. Did you get it? Patricia asked. Her voice was flat. I shook my head, looking down at the carpet. No, Mom. The security guard would not even let me in the elevator. He said I looked like a vagrant. Emily let out a short, sharp laugh. She blew on her wet toenails. I told you, she said. I told Marcus this morning. Corporate America does not hire people who look like they rolled out of a gutter. You should have listened to us, Nia. You could have saved yourself the embarrassment and the gas money. Oh wait, you walked, didn't you? She giggled, covering her mouth with her hand. I stayed silent, letting the humiliation hang in the air. I needed them to believe I was broken. I needed them to believe I had absolutely nothing left. I am sorry, I whispered. I just want to go to my room. Not so fast, Emily said. She uncurled her legs and stood up, walking over to me. She circled me, inspecting me like a piece of merchandise at a discount store. We have a problem, Nia. The electric bill came today. It is $200, and since you have been using the lights to read your fantasy novels all night, we decided you should contribute. I have no money, I said. Marcus took my last $20. I know, Emily said dismissively. But you have assets. She reached out and grabbed my left wrist. I was wearing a watch. It was a simple silver timepiece I had bought for myself 5 years ago when I graduated college. It was the only nice thing I owned that they hadn't sold or destroyed. That is a Michael Kors, isn't it? She asked, tapping the glass face with her nail. It is a bit scratched, but we can probably get $50 for it in the display case. I pulled my arm back instinctively. No, Emily. Please, this is mine. I bought this with my first paycheck from the internship. And you are living under our roof with our charity, Patricia cut in from the sofa. She didn't even look up from her receipts. Give her the watch, Nia. Consider it interest on the loan. I looked at my mother. Then I looked at Emily. Her eyes were glittering with greed. She didn't need the watch. She didn't need the $50. She needed the submission. She needed to take the last symbol of my independence. If I gave her the watch, I was naked. I was theirs. Or so they thought. I looked down at the watch. I thought about the deed in my portfolio. I thought about the $120,000 debt they claimed I owed. This watch was nothing. It was a cheap prop in a play that was about to end in a bloodbath. Okay, I said softly. I unclasped the watch. The metal felt cool against my skin as I slid it off. I held it out to Emily. Here, take it. Emily snatched it from my hand. She held it up to the light, inspecting it for defects. Finally doing something useful, she sneered. She slipped the watch onto her own wrist. It was too big for her, but she admired it anyway. It looks better on me. You don't have the wrists for jewelry, Nia. You have worker hands. She turned back to the TV, dismissing me. Go clean yourself up, she said over her shoulder. You smell like wet dog. And don't forget, tomorrow is the big party. You are working the coat check. Wear something black and try not to embarrass us. I will, I said. I turned and walked toward the pantry. My wrist felt light, my heart felt heavy but steady. They had taken my cash. They had taken my car. They had taken my watch. They had stripped me down to the bone. But they forgot one thing. Bones are hard. And bones can be sharpened into weapons. I closed the door to my tiny room and locked it. I sat down on the bed and pulled the portfolio out of my jacket. I laid it on the mattress next to me. Tomorrow night. The coat check girl was going to become the executioner. I hoped Emily liked the watch, because it was the last gift she was ever going to receive. I lay back and stared at the ceiling, and for the first time in my life, I slept without dreaming. I didn't need dreams anymore. I had a plan. The master bedroom was dark, illuminated only by the street lamp outside, casting long, distorted shadows against the silk wallpaper. Marcus stood in the walk-in closet, kneeling before the heavy steel safe that was bolted to the floor. This was the heart of the Brooks family empire, the iron box where Desmond kept the cash. He skimmed off the top of the pawnshop, earnings to avoid taxes. Marcus knew the combination. He had known it for years, ever since he caught his father typing it in his own birthday, followed by the year the shop opened. It was pathetic how predictable his father was. Emily stood by the bedroom door, keeping watch. She was filing her nails, looking bored, but with a glint of excitement in her eyes. This was her plan after all. The final nail in the coffin. Do it, she whispered. Before the old man wakes up to use the bathroom. Marcus wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans. He typed in the numbers. 4, 1, 9, 9, 0. The keypad beeped a confirmation, and the heavy bolt clicked back. He pulled the handle, and the heavy door swung open. Inside, stacked in neat rows, were bundles of $100 bills. The emergency fund. The renovation fund. The "we don't tell the IRS about this" fund. There was easily $50,000 sitting there. Marcus felt a surge of greed so potent it made him dizzy. He reached in and grabbed a stack. The paper felt crisp and powerful. He looked back at Emily. We are taking it all, he asked. Every cent, Emily said, walking over to him. She looked down at the money with hungry eyes. If we leave some, they might just ground her. If we take it all, it's grand larceny. It's a felony. That sends her to prison for 5 years minimum. Plus, we need the money, Marcus. That bookie is going to break your legs if you don't pay up by Friday. Marcus nodded. It was perfect. He could pay off his gambling debts, buy Emily that diamond bracelet she wanted, and get rid of his sister permanently. It was the perfect crime. He began shoving the stacks of cash into the front pocket of his hoodie. Bundle after bundle disappeared into his clothes. When the safe was empty, he stood up, his pockets bulging. Now the fun part, Emily said. She reached into the safe and pulled out the paper bands that had held the money together. The little paper strips stamped with the bank's logo and the dates. She handed them to Marcus. Plant them, she ordered. Deep in her bag. Make sure they are mixed in with her things so it looks like she tried to hide them. Marcus took the wrappers. He grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the dresser. He looked at the safe's keypad. With a grunt of exertion, he brought the heavy brass base down onto the digital lock. Crack. Plastic shattered. He hit it again. Crunch. Now it looked like someone had taken a hammer to it in a desperate attempt to break in. He tossed the candlestick onto the floor. Go, Emily hissed. Marcus slipped out of the room. He moved like a shadow down the hallway. He could hear the faint sound of water running in the bathroom downstairs. Nia was cleaning. Perfect. Her bag would be unattended in her room. He crept to the pantry door. It was unlocked. He pushed it open silently. The room was empty. Nia's battered portfolio bag was sitting on the small plastic crate she used as a nightstand. He unbuckled it. He didn't see the legal documents hidden in the secret compartment. He didn't look that closely. He just jammed the crumbled currency bands into the main pocket, shoving them down past her old hairbrush and her notepad. He closed the bag and buckled it again. He backed out of the room, his heart racing. He returned to the living room where the phone sat on the side table. He picked up the receiver and dialed a number he knew by heart. It wasn't 911. It was the personal cell phone of Deputy Sheriff Miller, his father's drinking buddy, and the man who made traffic tickets disappear for a price. The phone rang twice. Miller speaking. "Ray, it's Marcus," he said, injecting a tremor of panic into his voice. He was a natural actor when his own skin was on the line. "You need to get over here. It's Nia. Oh God, Ray, she robbed us." He paused, listening to the grumble on the other end. "Yeah, the safe. She smashed it open while we were asleep." "Dad's heart medication money, Ray. Everything. She's packing her bag right now. She's trying to run. Please, you have to hurry before she gets away. She's dangerous, Ray. I think she's on drugs." He hung up the phone and looked at Emily, who had descended the stairs and was standing in the shadows of the kitchen. She gave him a thumbs up. Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He patted the $50,000 hidden in his hoodie. He felt like a king. He had just solved all his problems. He walked over to the living room window and watched for headlights. 2 minutes later, lights swept across the driveway. But it wasn't just a patrol car. It was Miller's personal truck followed by a cruiser. The lights were flashing silently, painting the living room in strokes of red and blue. Marcus turned to the stairs and screamed, his voice tearing through the quiet house. "Dad, Mom, wake up, she's robbing us. Nia is robbing us." He heard the thud of feet hitting the floor upstairs. He heard his father's confused shouting. He heard the bathroom door downstairs unlock. Marcus smiled. The curtain was rising, and his sister was about to take her final bow in handcuffs. He ran to the front door and threw it open, putting on his best terrified face for the officers running up the lawn. In here, he yelled, pointing a shaking finger toward the back of the house. "She's in the pantry. Don't let her hurt my mom." He watched the officers storm past him, hands on their holsters. He watched his father stumble down the stairs in his bathrobe, eyes wild. It was chaos. Beautiful orchestrated chaos. Marcus reached into his pocket and fingered the cash one last time. "Goodbye, Nia," he thought. "Don't drop the soap." The front door did not open. It exploded inward. 2 uniformed officers stormed into the living room, their hands resting on their holsters, their eyes scanning the room for a threat that did not exist. Behind them walked Sheriff Ray Miller. He was a mountain of a man with a red face and a gut that strained against his tan uniform. I knew him. He had been coming to our backyard barbecues for 20 years, eating my mother's potato salad and laughing at my father's racist jokes. Tonight, he did not look like a family friend. He looked like an enforcer. "Where is she?" Marcus yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She is right there, Ray. She has the bag." I was standing by the entrance to the kitchen, clutching my portfolio. I did not run. I did not scream. I stood perfectly still watching the performance unfold. Sheriff Miller marched over to me. He did not ask for my side of the story. He did not ask what happened. He reached out and snatched the strap of my bag. "Give it here, Nia," he growled. I let go. He upended the bag onto the coffee table. My notepad, my pens, and my old hairbrush clattered onto the wood. And then fluttering down like confetti came the damning evidence. The paper currency bands, the ones stamped with the bank's logo used to wrap stacks of $100 bills. Desmond let out a gasp that sounded too theatrical to be real. "Oh God," he moaned, clutching his chest. "The emergency fund. She took it all. Patricia, she cleaned us out." Sheriff Miller picked up one of the bands. He looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and triumph. "We have a problem here, Nia," he said. "These bands are from the bank where your father keeps his business accounts. Marcus says the safe upstairs is smashed to pieces." "I didn't touch the safe," I said calmly. My voice was steady, cutting through the hysteria. "Marcus came into my room earlier. He must have planted those." "Liar," Marcus screamed. He lunged at me, but his wife Emily held him back, feigning a look of terror. "Why would I steal my own inheritance, Nia? You are the one who is broke. You are the one who came home begging for money." Sheriff Miller held up a hand to silence him. He took a pair of handcuffs from his belt. The metal glinted under the harsh living room lights. He walked up to me, invading my personal space. He smelled of stale tobacco and power. "Nia Brooks, you are under arrest for grand larceny and destruction of property," he recited. But he didn't put the cuffs on me yet. He let them dangle in front of my face, a heavy metallic threat. "In this state, theft over $5,000 is a felony," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial low. "You are looking at 5 to 10 years in the state penitentiary. And with your record, well, let's just say you won't be coming out until you are 40. I looked at the handcuffs. Then I looked at my father. Desmond was watching me with cold, hard eyes. There was no love there, only calculation. However, Miller continued, glancing at Desmond. "Your father is a good man, a pillar of this community. He doesn't want to see his only daughter behind bars. It would break his heart." He paused, waiting for the cue. Patricia stepped forward. Tears were streaming down her face, but her breathing was perfectly even. She reached out and took my hand. Her palms were clammy. "Nia, baby, please," she sobbed. "Don't make us do this. We don't want to send you to jail. We just want to protect the family." She reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out a folded document. It wasn't the employment contract this time. It was something else. "Just sign the paper, Nia," she whispered, squeezing my hand hard enough to bruise. "It is a quit-claim deed. It says you renounce any claim to the house and the business. If you sign it, your father will drop the charges. We will tell Ray it was a misunderstanding." I looked at the document. It was already prepared. They had this ready. The theft, the police, the raid. It was all just a show to get me to sign this one piece of paper. They were terrified I would find out about Grandma Hattie's will, so they were forcing me to sign away my rights before I could claim them. Sheriff Miller rattled the handcuffs. "Tick-tock, Nia," he said. "The judge is not going to be lenient. 5 years in a cage, or you sign the paper and walk away. It is a generous offer. Most daddies would let you rot." I looked around the room. Marcus was smirking behind his hand. Emily was watching with greedy anticipation. My mother was performing her grief. My father was the stone statue of judgment. They thought they had checkmated me. They thought I was the scared little girl who used to hide in the pantry. But they didn't know about the portfolio lying on the table next to the planted evidence. They didn't know that inside the hidden lining of that bag was the power to buy and sell every single person in this room, including the sheriff. I felt a cold calm settle over me. If I signed this document under duress, it would be voidable in court anyway. But I didn't want to void it in court. I wanted to destroy them in public. I pulled my hand away from my mother. I looked at Miller. "You are giving me a choice," I said. "Prison, or the paper." "That is the deal," Miller said. I looked at Desmond. And if I sign, I am free to go. Desmond nodded. If you sign, you are dead to us, but you are free. You leave this house and you never come back. I took a deep breath. I needed to sell this. I needed to make them believe I was defeated. I let my shoulders slump. I let a tear, a real tear of rage, slide down my cheek. I cannot go to jail, I whispered. I won't survive in there. Smart girl. Miller grunted. I reached for the pen my mother was holding, but then I stopped. I looked at the sheriff, then at the neighbors who were starting to gather on the front lawn drawn by the police lights. I will sign, I said, my voice gaining a little strength. But not here, not like this. Desmond frowned. What are you playing at? I want witnesses, I said. You accused me of being a thief in front of the whole town. You told my employers. You told the church. If I am going to sign away my birthright, I want everyone to see that I am doing it to pay back a debt I didn't owe. I turned to face my father. Tomorrow night, at the anniversary party, I will sign the deed in front of the mayor and all your friends. I will confess that I am the black sheep and I will give you everything. Desmond's eyes narrowed, then widened with pride. He imagined the scene, his rebellious daughter kneeling before him in public, handing him total control. It was the ultimate ego stroke. Fine, he said. Tomorrow night. But Ray keeps the handcuffs ready. If you try to run, if you try anything funny, you go straight to a cell. I nodded. No funny business, Dad, just the truth. I looked at Marcus. He winked at me. I lowered my head to hide the smile that was threatening to break through. You have no idea, brother, I thought. You have absolutely no idea. I held the cheap plastic pen my mother had thrust into my hand. It hovered inches above the signature line of the quitclaim deed. The ink inside was black, but to them it looked like gold. It looked like total victory. The room was silent save for the heavy breathing of Sheriff Miller, who was still fingering the handcuffs at his belt. Every eye was fixed on the tip of that pen. My father Desmond was practically vibrating with anticipation. He looked like a hunter watching a trapped wolf finally bare its throat. I lowered the pen slowly. Then I stopped. I pulled my hand back and capped it with a loud, definitive click. Not here, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor blade. Desmond's face twisted into a snarl. He took a step forward, his hands balling into fists. What are you doing, Naya? Do not test me. Ray put the cuffs on her. She is wasting our time. Sheriff Miller unhooked the handcuffs from his belt, the metal jingling ominously. Wait, I said, raising my hand. I am not refusing to sign. I am agreeing to your terms. I will give you the house. I will give you the business. I will sign away my life. But I have a condition. A condition, Emily scoffed from the corner. She was clutching her husband's arm, looking at me with pure disdain. You are in no position to make demands. You are a felon in waiting. I ignored her. I looked straight at my father. I locked eyes with him and channeled every ounce of submission I could fake. I let my shoulders slump. I let my lip tremble. I want to do it right, Dad, I whispered. Desmond paused. The anger in his eyes was replaced by confusion and then curiosity. Do it right. What does that mean? You always said that reputation is everything I said. If I sign this here in the dark, people will still talk. They will say you forced me. They will say you threw your own daughter out on the street. I took a step closer to him, playing to his ego, playing to his desperate need to be seen as the benevolent patriarch. But if I do it publicly, I continued, if I stand up in front of everyone at the anniversary party tomorrow night and confess, if I tell them that I stole the money because I was jealous of Marcus, if I tell them that you are a saint for not pressing charges, then you are not the villain. You are the hero. You are the merciful father who saved his wayward child from prison. I watched the gears turn in his head. It was a slow process, but inevitable. Desmond Brooks did not just want money. He wanted adoration. He wanted the community to look at him with awe. He wanted to be the king on the throne granting a pardon to the peasant. I want witnesses, I said, driving the nail home. I want the mayor to see it. I want the pastor to see it. I want everyone to know that I am the problem and you are the solution. Desmond looked at Patricia. My mother was wiping her fake tears, but her eyes were calculating. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. She saw the value in it. It would secure their social standing for years. Desmond turned back to me. A slow, cruel grin spread across his face, revealing his yellowed teeth. You want an audience? He asked. I nodded. I want to clear my conscience, and I want to leave this town knowing that I did the right thing by you. Desmond threw his head back and laughed. It was a loud, booming sound that made my skin crawl. He slapped Sheriff Miller on the back. Did you hear that, Ray? She wants to make a speech. She wants to testify. He turned to me, his face shining with sweat and triumph. Fine, you have a deal. Tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. We will put you on the stage right after the cake cutting. You will take the microphone. You will apologize to your brother. You will apologize to your mother. And then you will sign this paper on the podium while the whole town watches. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee and malice. I want you to cry, Nia. I want them to see the remorse. I want you to kneel. Can you do that for me? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised me, who was supposed to protect me. I saw a monster. But monsters are easy to kill if you lure them into the light. I will kneel, Dad, I said softly. I promise. It will be a performance they will never forget. Sheriff Miller put the handcuffs back on his belt. He looked disappointed, but he followed orders. All right, Desmond, he grunted. But I am keeping a cruiser parked outside tonight. If she puts one toe off the property before the party, I am hauling her in. She won't run, Desmond said, confident now. She knows this is her only way out. Besides, where would she go? She has no money. She has no car. She is nothing without us. He snatched the quitclaim deed from my hand and folded it carefully, placing it in his breast pocket. Go to your pantry, Nia, he commanded. Get your beauty sleep. You need to look pathetic tomorrow, but not ugly. We have standards. I turned and walked away. I walked past Marcus, who was snickering into his hand. I walked past Emily, who was already mentally spending the inheritance she thought she had just secured. I walked into the kitchen and opened the door to my tiny room. I closed the door and locked it. I leaned against the cold wood and let out a breath that shook my entire body. I slid down to the floor, hugging my knees to my chest. They thought I had promised surrender. They thought I had agreed to my own execution. I looked at the portfolio hidden under the mattress. The ink on the foreclosure documents was already dry. The acceleration clause was waiting. I had promised to kneel. And I would. I would kneel to sign the paper that evicted them from my property. I had promised a performance they would never forget. And that was the truest thing I had ever said. Tomorrow night, the pawn shop would celebrate 30 years of business, and at 8:05 it would celebrate its first minute under new management. I crawled into bed, pulling the thin blanket up to my chin. Outside, the rain had started again, tapping against the roof like a countdown. Tick-tock, Desmond. Enjoy your victory lap. Because when the curtain rises tomorrow, you are going to realize that you are not the director of this play. You are just a prop. And I am the one holding the script. The Golden Oak Country Club was the kind of place where the air conditioning smelled like old money and the carpet was thick enough to bury a body in. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting a prism of light over the town's elite. My father had rented the entire ballroom for the 30th anniversary of Brooks Pawn and Loan. It was an extravagance he could not afford, paid for with credit cards that were technically in my name. I stood by the entrance wearing a simple black dress that blended into the shadows. My mother had instructed me to man the coat check until the speeches began. She said it was a fitting role for someone who had tried to rob the family. I took the furs and the cashmere coats from the guests, hanging them up with mechanical precision. Every time I accepted a garment, I smiled a tight, polite smile. They looked at me with pity or disdain, whispering behind their hands as they walked away. Poor Desmond, one woman murmured to her husband as she handed me a mink stole. To have a daughter like that. I heard she is addicted to gambling. It is a tragedy, the husband replied, adjusting his silk tie. But Desmond is a saint. He is not pressing charges. He is keeping it in the family. I hung up the mink. I wanted to laugh. They were praising the parasite and spitting on the host. But I kept my mouth shut. I checked my phone. 7:45, 15 minutes until the execution. Inside the ballroom, the party was in full swing. I watched from my station like a ghost haunting her own funeral. Waiters in white tuxedos circulated with trays of shrimp cocktail and champagne. My father stood in the center of the room holding court. He was wearing a tuxedo that strained at the buttons, his face flushed with alcohol and adoration. The mayor was shaking his hand, slapping him on the back. The pastor was nodding solemnly at whatever lie Desmond was spinning. And then there was Emily. She was the loudest thing in the room. She was wearing a sequined red dress that caught every light, looking like a walking stop sign. She was surrounded by a group of women holding her wine glass like a scepter. I watched her point to the heavy gold bracelet on her wrist. My stomach twisted. It wasn't the watch she had taken from me yesterday. It was new. I stepped out from behind the coat check counter and moved closer, staying in the periphery. I needed to hear this. "Oh, this old thing," Emily laughed, her voice shrill and carrying over the music. "No, Marcus just bought it for me this morning, and you should see the car we ordered. A Mercedes G-Wagon, matte black. It arrives next week." A woman in a blue dress gasped. "Those are expensive, Emily. Business must be booming." "It is incredible," Emily preened. We had a sudden windfall. A silent investor finally paid out some dividends. We decided to treat ourselves. After dealing with all the family drama lately, we deserve a little luxury, don't you think? She took a sip of her wine, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. Her smile sharpened. She excused herself from the group and sauntered over to where I was standing. She smelled of expensive perfume and arrogance. "Enjoying the party, Nia?" she asked. "I am just doing my job, Emily," I said. "Good," she said. "Make sure you don't lose any of those coats. Some of them are worth more than your life." She leaned in close, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "By the way, the Mercedes, we put the down payment on it with the cash from the safe. Your cash, I thought you should know. It drives like a dream. Or it will once we get it." She pulled back, winking at me. "Don't look so sad. You are signing the house over to us in 20 minutes. Think of it as a parting gift. You are finally useful for something." She turned and walked away, her hips swaying. I watched her go. She was so confident, so sure of her victory. She didn't know that the windfall she was spending was actually a felony wire transfer that my forensic accountants had tracked down 3 hours ago. She didn't know that the Mercedes dealership would be getting a call tomorrow morning about a frozen check. I looked toward the stage. A waiter was adjusting the microphone stand. A large cake sat on a table nearby, decorated with the pawnshop logo in icing. 30 years of integrity written in blue script. The irony was suffocating. My brother Marcus walked up to the stage. He tapped the microphone. The feedback squeal silenced the room. "Testing, testing," he said. "Can everyone hear me?" The crowd applauded politely. Marcus grinned. He looked at me across the room, his eyes mocking. "If everyone could please take their seats," he announced. "My father has a few words to say. And then we have a very special presentation, a moment of truth and reconciliation for the Brooks family." The guests began to move toward the round tables. I stayed where I was. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. I felt the weight of the portfolio tucked into the shelf behind the coat check counter. I looked at my father as he walked up the stairs to the stage. He bathed in the spotlight, raising his hands to quiet the applause. He looked powerful. He looked untouchable. "Welcome, friends," he boomed. "Welcome. 30 years ago, I started this business with nothing but a dream and a prayer." I watched the mayor nod approvingly. I watched the pastor clasp his hands. I built this on trust, he continued, on family values, on doing the right thing even when it is hard. I checked my phone again. 7:58. Sarah Jenkins had texted me 1 minute ago. The team is outside. Signal when ready. I looked at the text. Then I looked at my father. He was just getting started on his speech about honesty. He had no idea that the real owner of the building was standing 20 feet away, holding his eviction notice. I reached behind the counter and picked up the portfolio. I smoothed down my black dress. I wasn't the coat check girl anymore. I wasn't the thief. I was the landlord. And rent was due. I stepped out from the shadows and began to walk toward the stage. The lights seemed to dim around me. The noise of the crowd faded into a dull roar. All I could see was the microphone. It was waiting for me. It was time to sign. But first I was going to let him finish his lie. I wanted the fall to be from the highest possible height. The walk from the coat check station to the stage was only 30 feet, but it felt like crossing a minefield. The room had fallen into a hush. The clinking of silverware stopped. The murmur of gossip died down. All eyes were on me. The prodigal daughter. The thief. The disgrace. I could feel their judgment like a physical weight pressing against my skin. I kept my head down, playing the part of the beaten dog. I clutched the leather portfolio to my chest, my knuckles white. I reached the stairs to the stage. My father, Desmond, reached down a hand to help me up. It was a gesture of performance art. To the audience, he looked like a loving father guiding a lost child. But as his fingers dug into my arm, his grip was painful. He leaned in close, his cologne overpowering the smell of the cake. "Make it good," he hissed through his smiling teeth. "Cry. If I do not see tears, you are sleeping in the street tonight." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the floor. I stepped up onto the platform. The spotlight hit me blindingly bright. It washed out the faces of the crowd, turning them into a sea of darkness. I walked to the podium. Marcus stepped aside, smirking. He patted my shoulder as he passed a condescending tap that said, "I won, you lost." I stood before the microphone. I reached out and adjusted it. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer volume of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I looked at my mother, Patricia, sitting in the front row. She dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue, waiting for her moment of vindication. I looked at Emily, who was holding her phone up, recording me for her social media. I took a deep breath. The air in the room was stale and cold. "My name is Nia Brooks," I said. My voice echoed through the ballroom, slightly distorted by the speakers. "For 29 years, I have lived in the shadow of this business. My father, Desmond Brooks, built this pawn shop from the ground up. He tells everyone that it was built on hard work and family values." I paused. Desmond nodded encouragingly. This was the script he wanted. "He tells you that family is everything," I continued. "He tells you that loyalty is the currency of love, and because of that, he asked me to stand here tonight and confess. He asked me to tell you who I really am." I gripped the sides of the podium. "My parents told you that I am a thief. They told my employers that I cannot be trusted. They told the police that I stole $50,000 from the family safe." A gasp rippled through the room. I saw the mayor lean forward. I saw the pastor shake his head sadly. "And I want to set the record straight," I said. My voice dropped an octave, becoming steel. "I did not steal $50,000. Desmond's smile faltered. He took a half step toward me, his eyes widening. "I did not steal from the safe because there was no money in the safe," I said louder now. "The money my brother Marcus claimed was stolen was actually embezzled by him over the last 3 years to pay for his gambling addiction." Marcus dropped his drink. The glass shattered on the dance floor, a sharp, explosive sound that punctuated the sentence. Nia Desmond roared, lunging for the microphone. "Cut the mic." Someone cut the mic. I pulled the microphone stand back, dodging his hand, but I did take something. I shouted over the rising commotion. "My parents are right about one thing. I am a thief. I took something that they thought belonged to them." I looked toward the back of the room. I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. The double doors at the entrance of the ballroom flew open with a force that shook the walls. The sound was like a thunderclap. Every head in the room turned. Standing in the doorway framed by the light of the hallway was Arthur Sterling. He looked like a god of war in a charcoal suit. Flanking him were 10 lawyers moving in a V formation like a flock of predatory birds. They marched into the room. Their footsteps were perfectly synchronized, a rhythmic drumbeat of doom on the hardwood floor. Arthur Sterling, someone whispered. That is the CEO of Cybersec. Desmond froze. He looked at the billionaire marching toward the stage, and then back at me. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking gray and old. I took back justice, I said into the microphone. Mr. Sterling reached the stage. He did not ask for permission. He walked up the stairs, his presence commanding absolute silence. He stood next to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a protective, claiming gesture. Ladies and gentlemen, Sterling said, his voice booming without the need for amplification. I apologize for interrupting your cake. My name is Arthur Sterling, and I am here representing HMB Holdings. He gestured to the lawyers who had fanned out around the room, blocking the exits and surrounding the head table where my mother and Emily sat paralyzed. Desmond Brooks, Sterling said, looking down at my father. You are trespassing. Trespassing? Desmond stammered. This is my party. I rented this hall. You rented it with a credit card that was declined 5 minutes ago, Sterling said calmly. And you are celebrating a business that you no longer control. I opened the portfolio. I pulled out the foreclosure notice. I walked over to my father. He backed away from me until he hit the drum set. You wanted me to sign, Dad, I said, holding up the document. You wanted me to sign the quitclaim deed. You wanted me to give you the house. I slammed the papers down on the podium. Well, here is my signature. But this is not a quitclaim. This is a notice of acceleration and immediate foreclosure. I looked out at the crowd. I looked at Emily, who was trembling. I looked at the mayor, who was now looking at Desmond with suspicion. My grandmother, Hattie Mae Brooks, owned the mortgage on your house and the note on your shop, I said. She left it all to me. I am your landlord. I am your bank. And since you are in default, I am calling in the loan. I turned to Desmond. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. The locks will be changed at dawn. Desmond looked at the paper. He looked at Sterling. He looked at the lawyers. He realized with terrifying clarity that he was not the king. He was the peasant. And the girl he had tried to crush was holding the guillotine blade. You can't do this, he whispered. We are family. I leaned into the microphone one last time. Family doesn't steal from family, Dad, and family doesn't charge interest on love. I stepped back. Mr. Sterling, I said, they are all yours. The lawyers moved in. The party was over. The war was won. And as I watched my father collapse into a chair, I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I felt clean. I felt like I had finally washed the mud off my shoes. Jonathan Vance, the lead attorney, did not waste a second. He signaled to a technician standing near the audiovisual booth. The projection screen behind the stage, which had been displaying a slideshow of my father's charitable deeds, suddenly went black. A moment later, a new video feed flickered to life. The resolution was crystal clear. It was footage from inside the master bedroom. I had planted the pinhole camera in the smoke detector 3 days ago, knowing that sooner or later their greed would turn them against each other. The angle was perfect. It showed the heavy steel safe and Marcus kneeling in front of it. A collective gasp went through the ballroom. On the giant screen, everyone watched Marcus type in the combination. They watched him pull out stacks of cash. They watched him stuff the money into his hoodie. And then, most damning of all, they watched him pick up the heavy brass candlestick and smash the keypad repeatedly, staging the break-in. Marcus stood frozen near the cake table, his face draining of color. He looked like a deer in headlights. He tried to speak, to shout that it was fake, but no sound came out. The evidence was irrefutable. The timestamp on the video was from last night, exactly 1 hour before he called the police to arrest me. That is a lie. Marcus finally screamed, his voice cracking. That is CGI. She doctored it. I leaned into the microphone one last time. It is not CGI. Marcus, I said, my voice calm and amplified. And the audio is excellent too. On the screen, the video, Marcus spoke to Emily. We are taking it all. If we leave some, they might just ground her. If we take it all, it is grand larceny. Emily let out a strangled cry. She covered her mouth, but it was too late. The entire town of Fairfield had just heard her conspire to frame me for a felony. The mayor stood up, looking disgusted. The pastor turned his back on them. Mr. Vance stepped forward, holding a remote control. But we are not done, he announced. He clicked the remote. The video disappeared, replaced by a series of spreadsheets and bank statements. They were highlighted in red. These are the financial records of Brooks Pawn and Loan, Vance explained to the stunned crowd. For the past 5 years, Desmond Brooks has been reporting a net loss to the IRS to avoid paying taxes. Yet his personal accounts show deposits totaling over $500,000 during that same period. He clicked again. A document appeared showing the renovation fund that Marcus had stolen. That money in the safe was not reported income, Vance continued. It was illegal skimming. And by filing a false police report claiming it was stolen business capital, you have just admitted to federal tax fraud. Desmond slumped in his chair. He looked small. The arrogance that had defined him for 30 years had evaporated, leaving behind a frightened old man. He looked at Sheriff Miller, pleading with his eyes for help. "Ray, do something," he rasped. "Arrest them. They are hacking my files." Sheriff Miller took a slow step away from Desmond. He was a corrupt cop, but he was not suicidal. He saw the team of corporate lawyers. He saw Arthur Sterling, and he saw the undeniable evidence of a federal crime. He knew that if he sided with Desmond now, he would be going down with the ship. "I can't help you," Des Miller said, his voice cold. "This is out of my jurisdiction. This is FBI territory now." And then the final blow landed. Vance clicked the remote one last time. A letter from the Mercedes dealership appeared on the screen, along with a credit report for Marcus and Emily. Regarding the vehicle purchase mentioned earlier, Vance said, looking directly at Emily, "The check you wrote this morning for the down payment on the G-Wagon has already bounced. HMB Holdings froze all associated accounts 20 minutes ago." Emily's eyes went wide. She looked at her wrist, at the gold bracelet she had bragged about. She looked at the red dress she was wearing. "What do you mean, frozen?" she shrieked. Her voice was piercing, shattering the sophisticated atmosphere of the gala. "That is my money," Marcus promised me. "It is not your money," I said from the stage. "It never was. It was money stolen from the business. A business that now belongs to me." Emily turned on Marcus. She flew at him like a wild animal, her fingernails clawing at his face. "You told me we were rich," she screamed, shaking him by the lapels of his tuxedo. "You told me the old man had millions. You said we would be safe." Marcus tried to push her away, but he was weak. He stumbled back, knocking over the table with the anniversary cake. The massive confection crashed to the floor, splattering blue icing and sponge cake everywhere. It was a perfect metaphor for their lives. A sweet, decorated exterior hiding a hollow, crumbling mess inside. "Get off me!" Marcus yelled, shoving Emily onto the floor. "It is not my fault. It is her. It is the witch." He pointed at me, his eyes wild with hate. "You ruined everything," he shouted. "You were supposed to be the sacrifice. You were supposed to disappear." I stood next to Mr. Sterling, looking down at the chaos I had unleashed. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound sense of closure. "I did not ruin anything, Marcus," I said. "I just turned on the lights." Mr. Sterling nodded to the security team. 2 large men moved toward the stage, not to arrest me, but to escort Desmond, Marcus, and Emily out of the building. "Get them out of here," Sterling ordered, "and call the federal authorities. I believe they have a lot to discuss regarding tax evasion and insurance fraud." Desmond tried to stand with dignity, but his legs gave out. Two security guards had to hoist him up by his armpits. As they dragged him past the stage, he looked up at me. There was no apology in his eyes, only shock. He still couldn't understand how the tool he had used for 30 years had suddenly become the hammer. Emily was still screaming as they dragged her out, her heels carving lines into the expensive carpet. "My bracelet," she wailed. "Don't take my bracelet." I watched them go. The double doors swung shut behind them, muffling their cries. The ballroom was silent again. The guests were frozen, unsure of what to do. I looked at the ruined cake. I looked at the shocked faces of the people who had snubbed me for years. Then I turned to Mr. Sterling. "I believe I have some cleaning to do," I said. Sterling smiled. "No, Mrs. Brooks. You have a company to run. Let the janitors handle the mess. You have a board meeting on Monday." He offered me his arm. I took it. I walked down the stairs past the debris of my former family and toward the exit. I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me worth saving. My future was waiting, and for the first time in my life the path was clear. The sign above the door was no longer neon, and it no longer buzzed with the promise of quick cash for desperate people. It was a tasteful hand-carved plaque made of solid oak. It read, "The Hattie Mae Brooks Foundation for Financial Literacy." Underneath in smaller gold letters was the motto, "Wolves don't hunt skeletons." It was my private joke, a tribute to the woman who had saved me from beyond the grave. The building had changed, but the sidewalk was the same. It was still cracked concrete. It was still dusty. And it still needed to be swept every morning. I watched from the back seat of the black town car as two figures in gray jumpsuits worked diligently in the morning sun. One was older, moving with a stiffness that spoke of arthritis and defeat. That was Desmond. He was pushing a heavy broom, chasing cigarette butts into a dustpan. The other was younger, but looked even more miserable. Marcus was on his knees, scraping a piece of dried gum off the pavement with a putty knife. The orange vest he wore over his jumpsuit was tight around the middle, a stark contrast to the designer suits he used to strut around in. I signaled to my driver. He pulled the car up to the curb and put it in park. I did not get out immediately. I sat there for a moment just watching. A month ago, I would have felt fear seeing these men. I would have felt the urge to run, to hide, to apologize for my own existence. Now I just felt a mild professional detachment. They were no longer my monsters, they were my employees. The deal with the federal prosecutor had been simple. To avoid a 5-year prison sentence for tax fraud and embezzlement, Desmond and Marcus had agreed to full asset forfeiture and 3,000 hours of community service. And since I was the victim of their financial crimes, the judge had appointed me as the supervisor of their probation. They were not in jail, but they were in a prison of my making. They had to work for the foundation, doing the menial labor they had once deemed beneath their dignity. I opened the door and stepped out. The click of my heels on the pavement made both men freeze. They looked up. Desmond leaned on his broom, wiping sweat from his forehead with a rag. Marcus shielded his eyes from the sun. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said. My voice was crisp. Desmond looked at the ground. "Good morning, Miss Brooks," he mumbled. I walked over to the window where Marcus had been cleaning. I ran a gloved finger along the glass. It came away clean. "Much better, Marcus," I said. "Last week you left streaks. I am glad to see you are finally taking pride in your work." Marcus gritted his teeth. His jaw worked silently, swallowing the insults he wanted to scream. He knew that one bad report from me would revoke his probation and send him straight to a cell block. "We are almost done," Desmond said. He sounded tired. His spirit had been broken not by the law, but by the loss of his status. The neighbors who used to salute him now crossed the street to avoid eye contact. I checked my watch. It was a Rolex. A real one this time, bought with my first dividend check. "You have another hour on your shift," I noted. "The back alley needs to be hosed down. It smells like garbage back there. And since we are hosting a seminar for single mothers this afternoon, I want the entrance sparkling." I reached into my purse. I pulled out a crisp $5 bill. Then I pulled out another. I walked up to my father. He flinched slightly as I approached, but I just held out the money. Here, I said. He looked at the bill. It was a 5. The exact hourly wage he had offered me to work in his shop a month ago. The wage, he said, was all I was worth. Take it, I said. It is a tip. You are working hard today. He reached out his hand, shaking. He took the $5. The humiliation was absolute. He wasn't just broke. He was a charity case. I turned to Marcus and handed him his 5. Don't spend it all on lottery tickets, Marcus, I said. Investment is the key to wealth. Isn't that what you used to tell people? I turned and walked toward the entrance of the foundation. I could feel their eyes on my back. I knew they hated me. I knew they blamed me for their downfall. But it didn't matter. Their hate was powerless. It was just noise like the traffic on the street. I paused at the door and looked up at the sky. It was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The storm that had almost drowned me seemed like a lifetime ago. I thought about Hattie. I thought about the letter in the safe. I thought about the little girl who used to hide in the pantry dreaming of a way out. She wasn't hiding anymore. I pushed open the door and stepped into the cool, air-conditioned lobby. The reception desk was busy. Phones were ringing. People were getting help. I was building something real, something that would last. As the door swung shut behind me, cutting off the sight of the 2 men sweeping the street, I smiled. It wasn't a smile of revenge. It was a smile of peace. I had paid my debts. I had reclaimed my name. And most importantly, I had learned the lesson Hattie had tried to teach me all along. The only value that matters is the one you place on yourself. I walked into my office and sat down at the desk. I had a board meeting in 10 minutes. I had an empire to run. And for the first time in 29 years, I was exactly where I belonged. Nia's victory teaches us that your worth is never determined by those who profit from your silence. Her family tried to bury her in debt and shame, not realizing they were planting a seed that would grow into an empire. We learned that true power isn't about being loud. It's about strategic patience and knowing when to sign the paperwork of your own liberation. Blood makes you related, but only loyalty makes you family. Never let someone rent space in your head when you own the building. The best revenge is not anger. It is absolute, undeniable success. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to find your peace? Share your story in the comments below and subscribe if you are ready to reclaim your power.